Geek. Talking baseball every week. Cause the Gleeman and the Geek.
And welcome to Gleeman and the Geek. Do-Hyoung Park Part 2.
Yeah, well, we told him, we'll let you back on the show if you get back on Jeopardy. And the SOB went and did it. And so now he gets to come back on the show. He told me, actually, didn't you say, though, you actually don't like going on Jeopardy? It was your only way to get back on the podcast.
Well, how many losses do I need to have before it stops being my ticket onto the show?
Although
it's 0-2 right now, so I'm still in the first postseason of Twins postseason losses. But I don't think I'm gonna get to 0-18. But at what point are you like, all right?
I did joke the other day when we were like, hey, Doe's gonna be on the show, and I said, I've never lost at Jeopardy, for instance.
He's undefeated at
although
Jeopardy.
I saw you tweeted or you put that you figured out how many people have ever been 0-2 lifetime on Jeopardy, because prior to a few months ago, it was impossible to be 0-2, right?
Right.
Unless something, did they ever, this is going to reveal a lot about me, but I'm a big Family Feud watcher. That's the game show I like to watch. You know, the bourgeois game show, not Jeopardy.
I've just lost so much respect.
Often, you didn't have any respect for me, let's be honest. Often on Family Feud, way too often, they'll screw something up in the scoring or the judgment, or something will go weird, and they will bring a family back on.
Yeah.
And so you can go 0-2 on Family Feud semi-regularly, but I feel like Jeopardy doesn't really...
Isn't it just addition? You just add numbers together?
For Family Feud?
Yeah,
well, no,
right?
but they'll say we asked 100 women, what's the thing you'd want your husband to change or something like that. And somebody will say his big ugly face. And they won't determine that counts as appearance or something.
I see, all right.
And then afterward, the judge will be like, oh, that should have counted. So then Steve Harvey's got to come out the next day and he goes, the Johnson family's back because we screwed something up. They're back, basically. But in Jeopardy, that seems to rarely... They don't screw stuff up on Jeopardy, right?
They do, actually. I'll get back.
Okay.
But I saw the look that John gave you when you mentioned Family Feud.
It's a great show.
And it's the fun, because, and I don't, there's no undertone to this at all, John, but I have this image in my mind that just popped up when Family Feud came up of you and Chrissy just 2 drinks in a piece, just cleaning up with Steve Harvey.
Yes. Oh, Steve Harvey would like John. Because Steve Harvey there's a few things. First of all,
I'm a Richard Dawson guy.
I don't, oh yeah, you're thinking of Family Feud. I only watched the Steve Harvey one.
Okay, all right.
Because he's, I would say, pretty funny. First of all, I like to be some level of intoxicant before I watch it. So let's be clear. I'm not sober watching Family Feud, but it's our go-to. We have them on the DVR for you know what I mean? You come home from wherever, you're like, okay, we're both a little, let's watch 8
We're going to sober up a little bit watching Family Feud. All
because here's what Steve Harvey likes the most, and then we'll get to Doe, because, he's got stuff to talk about. Steve Harvey likes an older guy or a sort of goody two-shoes presenting woman who it turns out is a little nutty. So John, he'd be loving
great.
John.
That's true.
Because he would start out and go, what do you do? And then you'd make some euphemistic answer or whatever, and Steve Harvey would go, oh, this guy.
Both Chrissy and I would probably be
Chrissy would be good too. But anyway.
She'd go Northeast Philly. She'd appear like the good Catholic girl and then go some Northeast Philly answer.
You can play Family Feud. They have you can, I think, play Wheel of Fortune and Jeopardy, although they can't call it that. But there's you might know. But
online, you mean?
Locally. Becky went with a work group and they played Family Feud. It's called I don't know, Family Matchup or something like that. I think that's what it was called. Anyway, Doe aspires to be on Family Feud like any American person would, but has been on Jeopardy twice now. The most recent one, what was it, 3 weeks ago? How many weeks ago?
It was televised 3-4 weeks ago.
Wait, okay, well, now you can reveal this. So, Do-Hyoung Park, former guest, MLB.com.
And we are going to get to Twins news here, so we're going to dive back into Jeopardy and stuff.
But I'm just satisfying my Jeopardy itch. But when did you actually, because I've been pestering Doe about Jeopardy stuff, and were you going back on the show? And Doe, because he signed an NDA, or he just likes being mean to me.
Sure.
Didn't answer really anything for this whole time. And then I would go to Betsy, who I thought maybe had some insight, and she didn't know anything. But we were trying to do the math on
he's looking at his calendar.
He's looking at the Twin schedule, because there were a couple Doe doesn't miss home series. It's been my experience. as someone who also doesn't really miss home series. But you missed one or two, and then your road schedule got a little weird. So we were trying to do the math of like, well, when did he go out?
Is this when you supposedly went to like Yellowstone or something?
No, that actually.
No,
so,
I actually
that
went to
actually.
Okay.
I'm outdoors.
So when did you actually record the episodes?
It was in mid-September, so I'm pulling it up
that's so
now.
much later.
Well,
Much later than I
I thought it was just hilarious that this subplot got you guys up in a tizzy so much.
Yeah.
By the way, I
Oh.
thought it was so funny. You guys were doing the math. It was the Kansas City series mid-September.
Wow. So they tape much less in advance than I figured. Like I thought it would have to be like at worst August, because I just figured they had everything in the can, but they did that pretty quick turnaround, like for television standards, it seems like.
And I don't know if that's by design because it's a tournament or what, because they need to just
Right.
keep it under wraps, and they had an
That's true,
actual
yeah.
studio audience of like actual randos and not just
So
like
that was
they have for
after.
tournaments.
So
in the
that was
past.
right after the 5-game series at Cleveland,
right before.
right before the 5.
Right
so it was the
before.
home series versus
Yeah, it was
Kansas
the
City.
home
Oh,
series.
all right.
See,
okay.
that's when he
And so
missed the home series.
right after the Cleveland sweep at home.
Right. So this was going to be. It was tough to schedule.
Which Cleveland sweep was it just after?
There's no date he could say that wasn't before or after a bad series against
Let
Cleveland.
me tell you, I had to tape in L.A., lose, and then fly from L.A. to Cleveland, which is a weirdly difficult flight to make. I was late for Clubhouse the first day and couldn't tell anybody why. And then the Twins lose 4 of 5 in
funny.
Cleveland.
That's funny.
Just like, well, this has sure been a week for them.
It was it's interesting too, because like when you were on the first time, which you came on the show and we talked about it and everything, and then once people heard you were going to be on a second time, like players and staffers of the Twins got very interested.
Sure,
Like,
yeah, right.
It was interesting. Like even Baldelli would say stuff about it, and like it's really, I don't know if Jeopardy has just become more a part of my life since the pandemic, because we
Sure.
really just started watching it a ton. Like I watched it occasionally,
As opposed to Family Feud, which has always been.
yeah,
there.
well, that's always been a
That's
part
always
of my
been
life.
a go
since birth. No, I guess I'm a Steve Harvey fan. I didn't think that before the last 2 minutes, but or Jeopardy has become like legitimately more popular nationwide, but I feel like it's become like, I think going on Jeopardy for you now is a much better like ego boost status symbol than
Oh,
it
for
would have
sure.
been like 15 years ago.
Oh, for sure.
Like people seem much more aware of it now,
Yeah, I think
which
so.
I thought was. I told Doe, like, I was prouder of Doe than I've ever been of myself for doing anything. Now, with that said, I haven't really done anything that you would necessarily be that proud of. But like, we watched at the Loon with like some of your family, friends.
Right.
It was the BBWA meeting before, so everybody was there. Like, and I also thought at first, because I watched it before going to the BBWA meeting, so I knew you hadn't won. And at first, I thought, "Ooh, is this going to be weird for Doe? Like having a little watch party when you don't win?" And then I thought, well, no, he's actually probably proud of just being on the show
not to
and
mention, like
competing.
he was the one who scheduled the watch party.
Right, he knew he didn't win.
He knew he
That's
had
a good-
won.
That's a good point. Anyway, these are all questions. Feel free to tackle any of them, Doe. But yeah, so you went on the second chance tournament, and well, I mean, I don't know. Should we talk
No,
Pohlad before
we
I
should
get
talk
into?
twin stuff first,
Yeah,
and then
okay,
we'll get
so let's
back
talk
to
Pohlad.
I've been
No
waiting
weird
for you to
jump cuts
segue.
and
You
stuff.
just can't
Well, yeah,
do it. You start swimming in the Jeopardy pool, and you cannot get out.
I like game shows. I guess I don't know.
Quick word from a sponsor, Soda Stick. It is Christmas season. It is holiday season. You're going to want to go grab yourself some shirts at Soda Stick because they've got a wide array of imaginative stuff. I just saw, I think we talked last week, saw the Arise 316 shirt out in the wild being worn by the bartender who, by the way, was given it to by his brother as a present.
The perfect present. If you're a Twins fan, they got a lot of good baseball stuff, including that. If you're Vikings, Wild, Wolves, Gophers, whatever, they're constantly coming up with new designs.
Right.
Sort of in the moment based on stuff that is actually happening.
By almost definition, limited edition.
Yes.
Do you know what I mean? Because you go out there and, they don't have that size anymore.
Yeah.
You know, something
Act
like that,
quickly.
right? Yeah.
Yeah,
right.
they had a Miranda shirt that sold out before it was even offered, I think. So you can go to sodastickco.com or just Google Soda Stick, soda like Minnesota.
Soda, SOTA.
Put a bunch of stuff in your cart. Do all your holiday shopping there.
And then
use the promo code Gleeman when you're checking out, and you get, 15% off?
15% off.
Your whole order at sodastickco.com.
And you want to do it now because it's going to take them a little time to ship.
Yeah.
You try and get it done by this first week of December so you can get that done. In fact, it says right here, they guarantee shipping if you get your order in by December 9th. So do that. And don't forget to check out those Kirko Chain shirts, which are showing up this week, too.
We should also mention Trade Coffee, which
great
John
gift.
and Chrissy have been going through this.
My wife is so happy I give her Trade Coffee on a regular basis.
Here's how Trade Coffee works, basically, is you go there and you tell them what type of coffee you like, what type of coffee you don't like, and then they will set you up with like small batch distributors of really good specialized coffee, high-end coffee from around the country. Like, you want to get something from Seattle, you want to get something from Austin, you want to get something from Boston, whatever, and they send it to you, delivered right to you.
Yeah.
You try it. If you like it, you say, oh, I like this, and then they'll sort of use their intelligence to recommend similar things that you would also like. And if you tell them you don't like something, they'll kind of cross that off the list and sort of form their next recommended batch of coffee.
And it's not only great for like you and yourself, but with the holiday season coming up, it's also great. Like Thanksgiving, after dinner, we serve coffee.
Right.
And I got to tell you, having that fresh bag of Trade Coffee that had come 2 days earlier and was that much more nice way to finish off a meal. So
you can get $30 off a subscription with Trade by going to drinktrade.com/Gleeman. That's drinktrade.com/Gleeman. You start trying all kinds of different
get yourself
coffee.
your $30 off. We had some Twins news. Break.
Yeah, so since last we did the show,
right.
The Twins announced. Well, first they just sent an email, I think, to all employees,
Yes.
and then the Twins
it wasn't. Yeah,
That's
it's not
all.
totally clear that there was a. Did it catch them off guard? Did it catch the PR team off guard that
No.
this was going?
I don't think so.
Because it felt like they were scrambling the rest of the day to sort of go, well, well, there's no press release about it. There was no.
Yeah, maybe.
you know?
I don't know. I mean, the Strib got an interview an hour later, so that was set up, obviously.
Yeah, I would think so.
Yeah, but so the announcement they made, Jim Pohlad, who's been the chairman?
Executive
chair, which is like he's the
and the controlling
public-facing owner. Because Carl Pohlad bought the Twins in 1984,
right.
and then died in 09, I want to say, 08, 09, something like that. And he was going to give one of his sons was going to take over. It ended up being Jim later that year, I think. And he's been when people think of owner, who's the Twins owner, it was first Carl Pohlad, then it was Jim Pohlad for the last.
He's the guy on the spot.
Yeah, 13 seasons or something like that. But really, there are three sons: Bill, Bob, Jim. Are those the names?
I don't know.
I'm not trying to be insulting by not.
I'm sorry.
They're very common names. And now Joe. But they all have the same ownership stake, I think, or they're all owners of the team. But he was the front-facing one because the Pohlads have a ton of businesses. I mean, they just opened the Four Seasons by the ballpark. So, they're all overseeing different stuff. And so he announced yesterday to team employees that he's stepping down or aside, however you want to phrase it, as the executive chair and is now
Jim, Bill, and Bob, yes.
Hey, I was right.
Yep.
My next ones were going to be like Ted, Phil, I don't know. Not a lot of Aarons and Johns it could have been. No Does.
Sure.
Anyway, that Joe Pohlad, who's his nephew, Jim Pohlad is in his 60s, I'm assuming. Joe Pohlad, I keep looking at Doe like he knows these things. Joe Pohlad's in his 40s.
He's 40.
Yeah, okay. So it was a, second generation handing the ball to the third generation, taking over. The other part of the announcement that was kind of interesting was that Jim said he's still going to be the face of the Twins for league matters, basically. So when he goes to the competition committee or the next CBA gets negotiated, or you just have to go meet with Rob Manfred about something.
I wondered about that since this happened right after the owners' meeting. Was that sort of going to be his last hurrah at the owners' meeting or something like that?
Maybe, because he's been pretty active. He's on committees and stuff within that. But the big change, I'll just read the exact quote because I don't know, I tweeted it out. But part of the announcement was he said that Jim said that Joe, his nephew, will take on day-to-day leadership responsibilities for the team effective immediately. He also said Dave St. Peter, who's the Twins president, and Derek Falvey, who's the president of baseball ops, will now report directly to Joe. So that's the biggest change
Right.
that you can at least know about now. And then the other thing he said, they talked about like how important it is, the stewardship of the franchise and all that stuff, multi-generational holding for our family. The one thing I thought was funny was like so many people, when I just tweeted out the quote because they sent us the email eventually, were like, oh, I wonder how he got the job, which, yeah, I'm all for a nepotism joke. As someone
Sure.
whose father was a bus driver and his mother was an accountant, I'm all for the nepotism
Right.
jokes. But
it's a family
who did
business.
people think were going to own the
Right.
Twins? Like John Bonus? Like what were they going to do? Like,
I don't actually know what the structure is of the Twins, whether or not they're like a subsidiary of the Pohlad companies.
Probably.
So it's not. I don't think it's that each of the brothers owns 1/3 of the Twins or anything like that.
No, I just think
I suspect they're all
the big corp owns.
ownership of the. But
I think that's
I
right.
don't actually know what that.
Well, because I don't even know that
structure
the
looks
Twins
like.
are the biggest thing they own. I mean, it's probably not the biggest thing they own. Like they own a lot of stuff.
Potentially.
So anyway, we've been asked like, what does this change? And I'm going to ask Doe the same annoying questions, but we don't know. Like, I mean, I've interacted with Jim and Joe Pohlad a few times over the years. I mean, certainly I can just piece two and two together. When you replace a 60-something guy with a 40-something guy, it's going to be a little different, probably newer school. You know, from talking to Joe a few times and talking to people who know him a little bit better than that, because he used to run the radio department and also bring me the news for the while.
Their media company,
Yeah.
Go Media, he ran.
I think that's.
I'm not sure if Go Media still exists, to be honest
No,
with you. I mean,
I think
they don't
they
own the
sold
two
off
radio.
the
They don't own
stations.
the two radio stations,
Yeah.
and they don't own Bring Me the News anymore.
Yeah.
So
But I think the sense is like, I mean, it's a cliche to say like a 40-year-old is just going to run it more new school and more maybe forward thinking or more aggressively, which I think people would probably like to see.
right.
I think the biggest change from reading his interview he did with the Strib is that he plans to just be more, not even public, but front facing towards players and staff, like be in the clubhouse more, which we never, I mean, maybe you have, but like I never saw Jim Pohlad. Only time I ever saw him was in the elevator when we were leaving
Yeah, right.
or whatever. One thing Doe and I noticed about Jim Pohlad, he will never get out of the elevator until he's the last person in the elevator. That's one thing I noticed about Jim Pohlad. That provides a lot of insight, I think. Into
He doesn't charge his way to the push his way to the front of the
to
elevator.
the point, and he had like a knee injury last year. I think this is public. And so like Doe and I are like, hey, go ahead, man. Like what? And
It
he's
reminds
just
me of the Captain America scene.
wants
Does
to
anybody
kill.
want to get off the elevator before we begin? I just see Jim Pohlad going.
Yeah.
Well, earlier in the year, I would only ever see him and his family on the stairs because I'm taking the stairs down
Oh,
to the
that's
clubhouse,
right.
and they would always
Yeah.
just kind of like
Joey's
see me
young,
and
and
stand
so he takes the
they'd always like
stairs
stand
for us.
aside and let me go by.
Yeah. Which, here's my feeling. I was like, go ahead. You own the literal everything here. Go ahead. And he's like, no. Which maybe if I was just a super rich guy, I would do that too. But well, yeah.
What was your impression, Doe, of like Jim Pohlad? How hands off or hands on was he in terms of? First of all, do you think you've got any real decent sense of it or not? Like, are you even able to make the call? And second of all, to what extent you can judge? What do you think?
No, and I think that's just kind of reflective of the attitude that he took in leading the department. You'd see him when he would, sit down next to Falvey at Twins or St. Peter at Twins Fest and take
Right.
banquet. And if this is just a public posturing thing or not, but essentially his thing was like, I don't know baseball. I'm just going to let the guys I hired to do baseball
And
do
I
the
presume
baseball.
he's running more companies than just the Twins
Well,
as
right.
well.
But
He's got much
here's
wider interests.
The thing,
right?
I think that's exactly right. And when people complain about sports team ownership, or let's specifically Twins ownership, I mean, the biggest complaint is they don't spend enough money. All that.
Sure.
But there's so many people that when the
And
team,
that, by the way, is probably not likely to change too much right now with the thing.
how they spend the same amount of money could
Well,
change.
one of the things they
potentially.
do say in that letter is he's still the controlling owner or the control owner.
Right.
And a controller at the company is generally responsible for
Right.
controlling the budget of the company. That's what the
when
controller
people
does.
complain about Twins ownership, rightly or wrongly, they're like, well, this isn't going to change until the Pohlad sell and all this stuff. And it's like, well, what do you really want out of team ownership? You want, I would say, three things in my mind out of team ownership for any team. spend a competitive amount of money on the team.
Right.
Now, it can be debated if the Twins do that, but last year and for the past 3 to 5 years, they've essentially spent an average payroll with a below average market size and revenue. That, to me, seems like a fair amount of money to spend.
Well, and I would suggest that even the people who, Common on KFAN, right? When he talks about the Twins not spending enough money or being careful about spending money, he is comparing it to like the Illiches. When they were interested, like he doesn't. His point isn't that they don't do a decent job of spending what they should relative to the rest of the league. It's more about I want an owner who cares enough to go above and beyond that and try to bring me a championship, right?
Which, okay, that's fine. Yeah.
Right.
You want him to hire good people.
Right. Yep.
Now, that's also debatable at this point in Twins history. And then the other thing, and maybe I'm alone on this, you want them to stay the F away from the actual inner workings of the baseball team.
You don't want them to insert themselves too much.
What you don't want is, Jerry Jones. I mean, it can be successful, but, I think like Mark Cuban is probably a good example of it going okay.
Right, yeah. That's a good point.
But, like, they don't need – and, I mean, this is the same thing people complain about with Dave St. Peter, which I always laugh at. Is like Dave St. Peter will tell you, like, I'm not making baseball decisions. They're not asking me which reliever to sign or whatever. And so they're certainly not asking Jim Pohlad. Now, maybe Joe Pohlad is a bigger baseball fan, or maybe he reads Fangraphs a little more, or maybe he wants
listens to the Gleeman.
Well, that won't help him be smart, but yeah, and maybe he wants to be more involved in the day to day, which is fine. Now, Derek Falvey and Thad Levine might have a different opinion of that, but there's a difference between that and
Dave St. Peter, someone
pushing for moves, and that remains to be seen. I mean, we have no idea if that's the case, but I do think that's the biggest sort of, to me, potential question. I think everyone's going to focus on, does this mean they're going to spend more? Does this mean they're going to spend less? I don't think that's probably going to be the case because, like you said, he's not ultimately deciding all that. But I think how they spend it in terms of like long-term contracts and stuff like that, and then just also what does an owner of the Minnesota Twins mean to the people employed by the Minnesota Twins and also fans? And I think that's probably going to change. You're going to see a lot more of Joe Pohlad on TV, doing interviews, maybe coming on a podcast, whatever it is. And players are going to see a lot more of him in the clubhouse than they ever did with Jim Pohlad. I don't know if that's good or bad, but that seems like the biggest change. I don't know.
I think there's a couple different approaches you take. There's visible owners, and I mean, especially in this sport, I feel like the owners that fans know or are more visible, you're probably not seeing them for at least like in the public
positive
reasons.
Yeah.
And I think probably the big
like
exception to
umpires.
that being like Steve Cohen once he took over the Mets, where he was both very visible but also kind of backed that up with letting his baseball people do the baseball stuff and also supporting them however he can. But I think that's just kind of the prerogative of what a modern baseball front office wants with ownership.
Well, that's an interesting thought, brother. I think there's a couple different things about Joe Pohlad that strike me as significantly different than Jim Pohlad, right? That's an interesting one that you just brought up, which is to what extent the Twins' perception, the way the Twins have handled it as the main spokesperson for the organization has generally been Rocco.
Yeah,
do you know what I mean?
DSP, Dave St. Peter.
I mean, Dave St. Peter from a business standpoint.
But yeah,
right?
rarely did Jim Pohlad, like Doe said, you saw him at a big signing press conference or some once a year press conference. But for the most part, it's been.
Whereas somebody like Cohen, he's the one that people. I mean, listen. The manager's still got to do a post game interview all the time and talk about the team and so on.
Right.
But in terms of like, here's the direction of the organization and where we're going. That's at the ownership level there. Whereas you're right, with the Twins, it's been Dave St. Peter from the business side, Derek Falvey from the baseball side, I guess. It'd be interesting to see.
Day to day.
Joe Pohlad is definitely more polished and and well, I guess I'll just say media savvy, I think, in a lot of ways.
Sure.
Than Jim. So it'll be interesting to see if he becomes more comfortable in that role. Certainly from the initial interview we got from the Suhan story yesterday, he didn't seem particularly comfortable in that role, and in fact seemed to sort of emphasize that he's going to defer to Dave and to Derek a lot in that particular thing.
But also that's reasonable to say.
Sure, of course. At the beginning, I absolutely expect that. I'd actually want that as a fan. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Now, he's had 15 years to prepare, and I'd say we can learn something from what he's done over those 15 years within And even without the Twins organization, part of those 15 years that they're counting is him overseeing Go Media, which wasn't really part of the Twins necessarily. I mean, it was. They had a close partnership with the Twins.
No, it was branching out, which they do a lot. I mean, the Pohlads, they got a lot of stuff. Like there's stuff that I've found out that they own over the years where it's like, oh, I had no idea. Like some building or something.
Like his brother was overseeing, Joe Pohlad's brother's overseeing the Four Seasons the development, right? Another brother oversees some automation or automated robotics kind of stuff, right? What we've seen Joe Pohlad take on over those last 15 years has been fairly significant initiatives and sort of, to some extent, innovative kind of things. Like the media company was a very aggressive one. I don't think they would say that turned out particularly well, but I could be wrong. Like I don't know exactly how much they ended up selling those radio stations for after they bought them for.
I think that was a red line on the old Excel spreadsheet, but that's okay. Whatever.
It could be right. Within the Twins organization, I know he did some marketing stuff. I know a lot of the tech stuff that they're. Well, I mean, they founded his position has been vice president of branding and growth. Yeah. Right. And I think and certainly from the branding part, there was the redo of the uniforms and the logo and brand and their brand, right? Which is by itself a pretty significant undertaking. And then from a growth perspective, they've got like that Techstars stuff where we see, a bunch of different, small, basically they become sort of a startup farm.
Yeah, they're like they're angel investors or whatever in a
bunch of, they have like a 3-month program and it's, they all seem to be sort of sports or entertainment or technology related, some kind of intersection of that sort of thing. That's also a fairly, it's clear when you're talking to Joe, he gets excited about big ideas. Right, and big changes, right? That seems to be what drives him, or at least a value that he embraces.
Which, if that gets taken from the business world to the baseball team,
right? Which I think he's tried to have an impact. I think he's tried to do that within the Twins. We've already seen that a little bit.
But I mean, what would that present itself as? That would present itself as,
I don't know,
not necessarily more spending, although that would be great, obviously. But I think it would present itself as. I mean, he even mentioned this in the Strib interview, which was like, I think he said something like, Jim hasn't been a big fan of long-term contracts,
right.
But that only matters if Derek Falvey's a fan of long-term contracts, right? Like if you're getting the same.
Right. I mean, and one thing that stands out to me is I've talked to Joe a couple times over the last couple weeks and months with the uniform thing. Is I just kind of, I had a chance to sit down with him and just kind of feel him out on his place in the uniforms thing, and just kind of, I think it was an answer to a question I asked about. So how different could this have been? I mean, we have this product now. What was the process like in terms of settling on this? What things did you try? And I think,
and by the way, that was a multi-year.
Yeah, it was like a 2.5 year process. I think.
And you talked to some of the players. Some of them were giving input on it in the 2021 season.
Yeah, right. And at least the answer he gave me to that, which I think may be revealing of just kind of the approach that kind of underlies. So I think like kind of a polished, but I think like quieter, softer spoken kind of guy that I've seen at least is he said my general approach to these things, I don't know the exact quote on me, is to kind of push the envelope as far as I can, see how far out we can get, and then to figure out how that fits into our constraints and scale back to the amount that we need. He gets excited by big ideas, like you said, and he really tries to push
if we really go nuts with it, and then kind of try to see what's reasonable with it.
That's an interesting.
He's definitely soft, like you said. He's not. This isn't like a George Steinbrenner. Like, he's not going to be a guy screaming from the rooftop.
No.
Like, he's a pretty quiet,
he's
not
a bombastic guy.
Right. I mean, he's maybe compared to Jim, he is.
Well, yeah, right.
But I don't. That family in general. I mean, I don't know. I never interacted with Carl or anything, but like they're pretty, buttoned down, laid back.
It would seem like that philosophy is pretty in tune with sort of Derek Falvey's thinking on stuff in terms of like we're going to be trying some innovative stuff, but we're going to be trying it kind of quietly.
Right. And I mean, you mentioned that, like, you got the Techstars stuff, you have the uniforms, I think there's esports partnerships going on and things like that too. I don't know how that translates into the baseball sphere. I'm really kind of interested to see how and if that transfers into the baseball sphere. And I think it's a really interesting off season for that, obviously, where they have the capacity to say, okay, new guy.
Right.
This is kind of a pivotal moment as far as it comes to, are they going to commit to a guy like Correa, or somebody else of that caliber. You have somebody else stepping into this kind of face of ownership role. Is he going to feel pressure to kind of mark that with something to kind of like plant his flag, which is what he did with the uniform thing to start?
He can be the owner who signed Correa if he wants to be.
Right.
Do you know what I mean? For better or worse. Like,
and he seems to be less risk. He seems to be less risk adverse than sort of the overall Pohlad philosophy, right? The stuff that he's taken on by definition is risky. They didn't need to do a uniform rebrand and logo rebrand. Just taking that on by itself is you're fighting to take a risk of something.
I don't know
right?
I think that's more. I don't perceive it as risk. There's no risk when you're billionaires. I'm not trying to be offensive to billionaires. Anybody listening?
No.
But what I think you're saying
but
is,
you're thinking of it straight from a monetary point of view. That's not really where the risk is.
You're more willing to go away from what has been your status quo, and you're more willing to push the envelope and all that stuff.
And to have everybody point and laugh.
Well, yeah.
Do you know what I mean?
Sure. And you're more willing to be creative, and I think that. But here's the thing: like, I'm sure it's true that Jim Pohlad doesn't like long-term contracts. I can tell you that because the Twins have never signed a long-term contract.
Right.
But that only matters, like I said, if the front office now with Joe Pohlad start pushing for long-term contracts.
Right.
I don't think Derek Falvey is a big fan. I'm not a big fan of long-term contracts.
No, I think that's a fairly safe
and it
assumption.
only really matters if they have approached Jim Pohlad for the past 5 years, let's say, with, hey, we'd like to sign Zach Wheeler, we'd like to sign Yu Darvish, we'd like to sign fill in the blank, Carlos Correa.
Right.
And he's pushed back against that. Right. And unless Derek Falvey is just the world's greatest actor, which is possible, he has not indicated that at any point, which makes me think that he hasn't really been pushing for that. Now, maybe it's a thing that is a self-fulfilling thing. Like if you know your owner, if you're a GM or a Pobo,
if you know your owner or you were hired by your owner,
right, and you know,
right.
it's not going to get a great reaction if I come with a 7-year, $200 million contract. So let me just put that out of mind and work around parameters that I know will work. And so, yeah, in that sense, having a new owner who's more open to that maybe opens all sorts of possibilities. But I don't know. I mean, the Correa thing is a little different. But if you're expecting Derek Falvey and Thad Levine and, Jeremy Zoll, Daniel Adler, whoever the decision makers in that front office, if you're expecting them to be like, oh, man, we got Joe Pohlad running things now. Oh, fire up those 10-year deals. Let's start putting in $500 million. I just don't think that's going to be the approach.
And at least with the Correa stuff, I mean, the stuff that's still coming out is like, okay, these like creatively structured deals, can we work options into there, that sort of thing. I mean, and just because Joe Pohlad has taken over in name now, doesn't mean that he's just going to step into that boardroom or wherever. I don't know where they have these meetings, but he's going to step into that boardroom on day one and be like, all right, it's me now. No, I'm sure like behind the scenes they've been there is a transitional philosophy in place. It's not like he's just stepping in fresh on day one, going like banging his hands on the table, being like, "Okay, things are different now."
They do them at Peg's Cafe when we're not there. That's
so
you can buy a burger in the press.
So the fact that at least that's what's coming out about the Correa stuff right now is that I mean, this I'm sure has been in conversations. Joe's been part of those discussions, I'm sure, throughout the off season in terms of kind of structuring out what this off season is going to be like when he takes over. I think the fact that we're not hearing
that's probably fair.
Shaking things.
Yeah, that's probably fair.
It's
not likely to necessarily change things, certainly this offseason, because odds are Joe Pohlad was already involved in those
I don't think it'll change something with Correa.
Yeah,
I think it will change things with either other than Correa or future Correa-like play. Because Jim Pohlad, even to someone like me, said once like how much he loved. I mean, like he loved Correa, and not only as a player, but like they felt he really was. If you're a second generation billionaires who own a baseball team, Correa is who you would want as the face of the franchise, and all that stuff. So, I believe I'm coming across as anti-billionaire, which to any billionaires out there, I am so pro-billionaire. As long as you want to bring me into the fold a little bit, but so yeah, that's the Joe Pohlad analysis. I think we're all sort of on the same page. I feel I would like to offer more meaty thoughts on this thing, but. And we could invent some.
We will reach out to him.
Yeah, we'll see. It's one thing to acknowledge you listen to a show.
It's true.
It's another thing to come on
show
a
up at a Winter Meltdown.
Yeah, to show up on a Winter Meltdown. Yeah. I did think that was like you said, it was 5 years ago or something. He showed up. He's wearing a suit.
So that's how I knew he was
He probably
owner
came
of a
right
baseball
over from
team.
Twins Fest.
Yeah, but no one else there was
Where
wearing
he
a
had to
suit.
do some
We had people not even wearing
handshaking and
pants at this thing. It was in the brothers' basement at that point. I remember I talked to him about our mutual friend Dana Wessel for about 8 minutes, and I thought, that's all I got. I'm not equipped to chat with a billionaire. I don't know what else to talk to him about. So that
I think most of the times I have talked to Joe Pohlad, it has been about one of two things. It was potentially internet businesses because he used to run one and I do run some. Or it has been, how's the family? How are the kids? How are things going?
That's what I should.
And that is in fact.
But I never think to ask anyone.
Well, I mean, that came across in the Suhan story. Is he's a family guy. Like he's a dad. He's a young dad.
I think he lives
Or not that
nearish
young,
me, and I've seen him with. He's got a couple of 10 and under kids that I've seen him with and all that stuff. This is now becoming creepy that I spotted him on the streets. But I was just saying what you were saying. Yeah, I really. Well, Doe knows this about me because I've burdened Doe with constant reminders that he reminds me of myself, and that one day he's going to be as grumpy and introverted as me, which he doesn't really seem to fight against. But yeah, I've never once. My uncle used to call me. He had a long
How
commute.
dare you do that to Doe? First of all,
I know it's a big burden, but he would start to see it, and then even people during the year would be like, "Oh, that sounds like something Gleeman would say." Like when Doe would say,
I'm bothered by how unbothered I am by
Right.
this. I don't know. I think I just kind of accept that.
But as we said on the last one, he presents as someone who has a much different personality than me. But deep down, there's a weirdness. But my uncle.
I think the longer you follow this team, just the
well, that's true.
we've all been down that
That's true.
path.
But my uncle used to have a long commute home from work, and he would call me a couple times a week just to shoot the S on the phone.
Right.
And one day he said, we've been doing this for months and months. You never once asked me, how are the kids? Who are my cousins? How's your wife?
Yeah, right.
And I said, I've never asked anyone that. It never occurs to me to ask it. And really, I figure if there's news to share, go ahead and tell me. Why am I prying it out of you? So yes, I've never. Yeah. So if you see yourself going along those lines, though, take a sharp turn and ask people about their family. Try to connect with other humans on a human level. Otherwise, you just end up doing a podcast with John Bonus. It's not that great. But, okay,
You
so...
end up getting to know his kids a little bit because you just walk in the house sometime and they stare at you and why are you in my house?
Yeah, well, that's true. John's son and I have the greatest interactions ever, which we just look at each other and we go, I don't want to talk. You don't want to talk? Okay, let's not even... Yeah, it's great. It's perfect.
It's a very 21st century.
Or you,
Yeah.
or you watch me and my daughter go and chase down her cell phone.
Yeah, I just sat in your living room. Okay, so...
Word from a sponsor that we both believe a lot in, BetterHelp, BetterHelp.com. Listen, if you are struggling with something, you want to talk to somebody with something, you think you might want to try some therapy of some sort, maybe you, maybe your spouse, I would recommend BetterHelp.com.
Yeah, it kind of removes all barriers for entry. So if you just wake up some morning and you go, today seems like a good day to talk to somebody, a lot of times to go through the normal process, you can't do it that day or even that week or sometimes even that month. And by the time it's set up, you no longer are motivated to do it, which is terrible because then you're not getting the help you need. So BetterHelp sets you up with a real therapist. And you can sort of customize it. If you want to do a video chat, they have that. If you don't want to be on camera, you can do a phone call. If you don't even want to do a phone call, you just want to type some stuff to somebody and be detached from it, which is probably what I would do. They'll set up a live chat that way too. And
It's
so
more convenient. It's more accessible. Oh, by the way, also more affordable.
Yes.
Right. Easy way. It removes all the barriers for reaching out and helping yourself out a little bit. And the way to do it is you go to, you can learn more and save 10% off your first month at BetterHelp.com/Gleeman. That's BetterHelp, HELP.com/Gleeman. And now we should also just talk about
Uncommon Goods. I got a Christmas present for one of our friends from Uncommon Goods. It just got delivered.
I just gave Chrissy I gave Chrissy some Philadelphia stuff. I gave her a Philadelphia wine glass and I gave her a Philadelphia bag. Here's what surprised me about it. She likes the Philadelphia bag because it's got Elfress Alley on it. I've seen in Philadelphia. She also just likes the bag.
Yeah, it's good quality.
Like it's a good quality bag.
Here, Uncommon Goods is like a massive amount of choices, number of choices to get presents for people, whether you know them very well or you're just buying something for a Christmas party you're invited to and you don't even really know that much, but you know where they're from or that they like baseball or whatever it is. You can find customized gifts and sort of unique
perfect for that.
offerings that you can't, it's not just buying them a gift card to something. You're actually getting them something that they'll remember who gave it to them. If you go to uncommongoods.com/Gleeman, you can get 15% off your next gift. That's uncommongoods.com/Gleeman for 15% off. Don't miss out on the limited time offer. Uncommon Goods, they're all out of the ordinary.
Let's see. I had a couple other things. Yeah, let's just do a little more Twins talk, and then we'll end with the BS session. But
Yes, excuse you. It's like 80% of my social identity you're talking about, Aaron Gleeman.
yeah, that's true. It's true. Yeah,
Like the only interesting thing
that
about
was
me.
it was jealous. It was jealousy on my part, framing it as that. Well, I was looking at my note about the initials game when I said that. Okay, so Twin stuff. I mean, obviously there hasn't been.
Are you going to winter meetings?
Yes.
Okay, all right. So you're also going to be there. All right.
Aaron will be there.
Yeah.
Do you have anything
Betsy will
in
be there.
particular you want to chase down? Any rumors or moves or something
Well,
like
he's
that?
not going to say now because then I'll swipe.
Well,
him.
all right,
Me
I
being
suppose
such
so.
a
I
crack
suppose
reporter
so.
over here.
My favorite moment of any winter meetings is what I call the State of the Boris speech.
Yeah.
Where
Right.
there, I don't know that there's any specific time that's communicated for it. Maybe
Whenever he
there is,
strolls
maybe
in.
there isn't. But it just seems like there's always just kind of you see a critical mass of people somewhere at the winter meetings, and you're like, I should probably be there. And then you go to the critical mass of people, and like 10 minutes later, Scott Boras shows up and he like stands on this platform that's materialized in the middle of the group, and then he just takes off and waxes poetic for about 45
And that's
minutes.
been true for a long time because this will be my first winter meetings in over a decade, and the two I went to in my 20s was the same story. And I remember the first time I went, it was in Orlando. It had to be 15 years ago. And the whole week, like for 2 or 3 days in the media workroom, people were mocking Boris for all the stuff Doe just said, which is all these one-liners he's got, and all these analogies and metaphors and comparisons and all this stuff and all these cliches. And people are just mocking him endlessly. Not the work he does as an agent, but just what a ham he is for the camera and blah, blah, blah. And then, like Doe said, he stepped 1 foot in that media room on like the Wednesday of that week, and just every big name baseball writer 10 years ago sprinted up,
instant copy,
and they were 9 deep around him, just writing down every word he said and tweeting out everything. And I thought, yeah, that's about right. Yeah. That's baseball reporting in a nutshell, which is, this guy's a little over the top. But I got to ask him about Correa, or I got to ask him about Rodon or whatever.
And I think actually Boris had a meeting, Boris Corporation had a meeting with the Twins this week. Did you guys? If you guys haven't heard that?
Know things, John. I don't know.
Yeah. Anyway, I think that they had.
I always worry John's going to say to me at the end of the show, "Oh yeah, I didn't hear any of that stuff." Because he'd be like, "Well, okay."
I should probably relate some.
No,
of
he
the
got
TV for
Reddit
the
all
actual
worked
podcast.
up. Twins Reddit was all worked up the other day because he was like, "Yeah, I
You
heard they
are on
offered-"
Twins Reddit.
You can't out yourself.
That's
It's
from
looking
Doe.
at Twins
I
Reddit.
know.
That's from Doe did that.
Well, that is the breaking
told me to do
news
it.
here. I know. Doe.
they were nice
I
to
know
us.
Doe is active on Twins Reddit.
Yeah.
And I know you went out and looked to make sure they were being nice to you.
Well, no, it was not. It was about us. It was about the show. No, I don't need them to be nice to me.
But now you're just a regular lurker, is what you're saying.
occasionally, yeah, occasionally.
All right. Okay, good to know.
Well, it's because Twitter's. Well, I don't know that Reddit's that much better, but yeah, John was like the other day. He was like, "Yeah, I heard they offered like $250 or I don't remember what you said." And Reddit, there was a Reddit thread. It was like, "What do people know about this bonus fella? Does he know anything?" And I wanted to like register an account and be like, "No,
No, not a thing.
I mean,
Promise
maybe,
you.
but
Right,
I don't
right.
know. It's unclear when John knows if he knows stuff. You know what I mean? Like, anyway. So yeah, winter meetings start Monday. I don't know if I expect. I mean, it's hard to predict, I guess. But we were talking on the last show. Like, it's funny that the winter meetings, everyone always goes, "That's going to be where everything happens." But there's no like technical reason for things to happen at the winter meetings, other than the Rule 5 draft being the last day. But that's whatever. Like, now you get everybody in one place, like we talked about on the last show, Boris and everybody else. But I feel like in the year 2022, like I just read something that Verlander,
That is less important when you can
on
text
back-to-back
everybody.
days, did Zoom meetings with the Mets and the Dodgers. And I thought, well, yeah, would it be helpful if Verlander and his agent were at the winter meetings and went up to the Dodgers suite and sat there for 45 minutes and had the, I don't know,
shrimp and beer or whatever, but like they can talk plenty as is.
And I mean, compare that to like when we first started writing, and Manny Ramirez would go on a tour. He would fly from city to
Right.
city
You
to
don't
city
need
to
to
meet with the baseball executives. Do you know what I mean? Like,
Although I'd let him wine me and dine me.
sure.
That's what the Athletic did for Russo. Ask Russo that
All
story.
right. Nobody believes that. Nobody believes that you would, given the option of calling in once a day on a Zoom to the various executives of baseball leagues, that you would rather fly to there just for a good dinner.
Well, it depends. How good's the dinner? And
it does not depend.
I think if you were offering me, $40 million a year, my personality would change a little bit. You know what I mean?
If you're being offered $40 million a year, chances are you can already buy yourself your own nice dinner.
That's true. That's a fair point, yeah. Yeah, the DoorDash possibilities at that level of income are just – I'm getting like –
You're just getting Chinese food from Milwaukee, from that little place in Milwaukee that you –
No, I'm getting Tinnick's sandwiches, pork sandwiches from Philly.
That's right.
Dry iced in from anyway. So yeah, obviously the Correa stuff is, has been, will be until it's not the big story. We keep trying to put percentages on it. So now I'm going to rope Doe into this, but I said at the beginning of the offseason, 5% chance that they re-sign him. I think John's also in single digits somewhere probably.
I'm a little higher than that now.
6.2% John's at.
I might be as high as 10 or 11.
Look at you. Dan wrote yesterday, I think, still less than 10%. What if you had to put a number, like a percent chance that Carlos Correa, I guess we can just phrase it, plays another game for the Minnesota Twins? What are you putting?
I've been at 5% ish since the offseason started. I don't know. I think we're all in the same boat.
Just any of the news that's been happening, or any of the rumors about the back and forth negotiations, et cetera, the changing numbers, the seemingly serious interest by the Twins, as opposed to just sort of having it out there. Any of that move the needle for you at all?
It's always what they're going to be saying at this point in the process, right? There's nothing for either side to gain by not. In that sense,
right?
I mean, and ultimately, at the end of the
both
day,
sides want to say they're
right. You're never
floating big numbers, right?
Boris is never going to be like, that's BS. The Twins haven't reached out at all. He wants people to perceive that.
It generates interest on the Twins side because the players obviously want him back. The players obviously clearly want him back. It generates excitement in the Twins.
Talk a little bit about your experience at the uniform thing, talking to the players about Carlos Correa.
Did you just do a talk about question?
Yeah. Well, because here's the thing. In every scrum, you ended up asking people a little bit about Correa, basically. There were 5 or 6 Twins players there, and all of them you were talking with them about. And
well, they FaceTimed him, right? Wasn't that a?
Yeah, I mean,
at one point they actually.
It's a very savvy move. I'm sure you have to be sure. I mean, Correa, very, very genuine guy. I mean, like very real, very aware,
but also very smart,
but also extremely smart.
Like in the middle of the season, I think I might have had this conversation with you, which is like we almost thought initially Correa was like putting on an act, like this is too friendly to be true. Right. Day one, he was like, "Hey, you're Doe, right?" And blah, 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 like talking to him. First of all, I still haven't introduced myself to Doe. It's been like
staying in the clubhouse in Fort Myers.
Yes.
Like this is like in the awkward interim stage where we knew he was coming. He was there. They just couldn't introduce him.
Right. So we couldn't actually interview him.
And I'm just like standing around, like doing my thing in the clubhouse or whatever. And I feel a tap on my shoulder, and I turn around, and it's like Correa coming to introduce himself. And I'm like, who does that?
Right. And not that I interviewed him a ton, but the 3-4 times I went up to him with some nerd question, like couldn't have been nicer. And we were all kind of like, this seems fake. Like this seems over the top. And what I said was, who cares if it is? Right. If you want to fake being nice to me for an entire season, what's the difference to me? Right. How is that any different? And I would argue, certainly, like you said, he's savvy enough to know that a little bit of effort goes a long way in this regard. I had this conversation with Michael Kadire once. There's a name drop at the Winter Meltdown about Delman Young. And I said the thing I never understood about Delman Young is I understand having a prickly personality. I have one. And I understand getting annoyed easily and maybe not want to talk to reporters. But I said to Kadire, who had the opposite reputation, Kadire was beloved by every media group that covered him. I said, doesn't a player like you ever say to a player like Delman Young or whoever, 5 minutes a week, and the entire way you're perceived will change? Because these writers are dummies. And I put myself in that too. You don't have to like go to their house for, Christmas dinner. You can give them one quote with a smile or just not be an outright jerk in some cases, and it'll go a long way. And I did come to, I think, Correa is pretty genuine, but also, like you said, very smart and very polished, and knows that if some schlub shuffles over to you on a Tuesday afternoon before the game and, stutters his way through a question about expected batting average, and you give him a legit answer with a smile and don't brush him off, that guy, this is me, if anybody has not gotten that reference, I'm the schlub, will forever be like, all right, Carlos Correa seems like a good guy. And I do think he's a good guy, but I also think he's really good at that. I don't know what the point of this was.
That's hard to fake for a full
that was my other thing,
62 game season.
Yeah,
I mean, when Josh Donaldson showed up at spring training, everybody was like, oh, well, here's a guy who's very interested in answering questions, and he's all the kids are really going to look up to him. He's going to be a leader in the thing.
Right.
Did anybody feel that way about Josh Donaldson by the end of the 162 games?
No, although he won the Media
He won Media Good Guy Award because he kept actually because everybody else was hurt.
That's how you know no one listens to me. That Josh Donaldson won the Media Good Guy Award. But yeah, I mean, I think and the other thing is like we're talking about the ownership level and the role they play in these types of contracts, and certainly you get up to a Correa level contract, it's an ownership level decision, and I wouldn't be surprised if Boris is just communicating directly with ownership, although I guess that's probably less likely with Joe than Jim Pohlad, although there's nothing stopping Jim Pohlad for getting involved too, but Boris tends to do that with owners at once you get above $200 million or whatever.
I get the sense that Boris doesn't want to talk to you unless there are owners in the room.
Sure, yeah.
and frankly, with the size of the contracts that they're dealing with, and the length of the contracts, that's often going to be the case. You
mentioned Donaldson, and certainly there are other examples of this. And I think the Twins aren't going to hand out other $200 and something million contracts. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like, I don't think they're going to hand it out to Correa either. But if they were, it's going to be a long time probably before you see another, top 10 contract in baseball signed by the Minnesota Twins. And I think their ability to sign that contract without knowing that this is the right person on and off the field is so small. Like, there's no chance that, which is why, by the way, I think if they miss on Correa, it's not like they're just going to turn to Trey Turner or, whoever for $200 million. Not to say that Trey Turner's not also a great dude. I don't know anything about him. But I think that being able to test drive Correa for a year probably has a bigger impact on the Twins' willingness to do something big long-term than it would with any other team or most other teams.
Being able to test drive and being able to know that he actually likes it here in a way that top free agents sometimes often don't, and know how well he connects with the guys. I mean, you can put on a face for media and that sort of thing, just like, drum up the schlubs like us.
We're easy.
But the way that the players talk about him too, the way that you go around and talk to Luis Ariz and Jose Miranda and everybody, and
they volunteer that they're in a group chat with each other, right?
The way that your other actual face of the franchise, Byron Buxton, puts his front office on the spot by saying, I know he wants to be here. We want him here. We just need to pony up and go get him. I mean, that's the guy. That was what he said, and that's your face of the front, who doesn't often like to make statements like that, who likes to kind of stay in the background, let his actions do the talking. That's a good point.
Whatever. That is not Buxton.
Saying we need to do
Buxton.
This.
Right.
No, they were a good. I don't even want to say odd couple, but they were a good because they're clearly very close.
Yang.
Like they were often, sitting by each other, talking, joking up. Like I'm sure they're like actual friends at this point. And Buxton is a lot of things, but a guy who wants to be on camera speaking extemporaneously is not one of them. But he's actually, I think, quite good at that if you get him in the right headspace, which is to say he's not talking about injuries.
Right.
But Correa, I don't know that Correa like wakes up in the morning and says, I hope they come interview me or anything. But Correa is just much, it's like you and me,
He's
John.
very relaxed about it.
If we sit down at a bar stool, I'm thinking, I hope no one comes up to me all night. And John's thinking, how come no one's come up to me yet? You know what I mean? That's just a different situation. And so if those are your two building block guys, and Buxton is signed for 6 more years with a no trade clause, if those are the only real two guys, if they ended up signing Correa, that you can say they're going to be around 5 years from now, that seems like a good combo. Obviously, you need him to stay healthy, you need him to perform and all that stuff. But yeah, with that said, so if we add all our percentages together,
and we toss in Dan's percentage, we're up to like, what are we up to? Like 25% maybe,
Something like
right?
that.
That's how percentages work, right? You just add them all up.
That's right. What would you do if you're how high would you go?
I mean, you give Correa what he wants from the start, because I think if you are going to, if you're a mid-market team,
You're
and you're
so
going to make it.
you said, and I'll just throw out you're paying him $35 million a year as opposed to Rodon 25 and another 10 million at somebody else.
I think yes.
Okay.
I
That's or 10 and 15, something like that, right?
I don't know. My standpoint, and there's a couple factors that go into this, but payrolls are rising, revenues are rising. You look at a contract like that. You look back at like the Bryce Harper and Manny Machado contracts from a couple of years ago,
Sure.
right? When those were signed, we were like, "Oh my God, what is going on here in terms of the years and the dollar numbers?"
I think
whatever.
they were the first 300 million.
Yeah, but those contracts look a lot better at 3 or 4 years.
And
than
a couple
they
years,
did.
I'm saying, a couple of years down the line, the market has moved to a place where we're like, okay, sure,
Yeah.
they're just kind of there.
Yeah, those contracts are designed to look pretty good after 3 or 4 years. They're not as designed to look very good at 8 or 9 years.
$35 million a year.
Yeah, I guess.
I got
understand.
nominated for preposterous statement tournament by saying this, but I said this about Correa. I was like, if you sign him to an 8-year deal at $35 million a year, I'm not saying $35 million is ever going to not be a lot of money.
Right.
But 6 years from now, in 2028 or 9,
Right.
I will guarantee you, unless something drastic happens to sports or the country or whatever, which I'm not ruling out at this point, $35 million a year is not going to be a top 10 contract. And we talked about this with Buxton. People are like, oh my God, they need Buxton healthy if they're going to pay him this huge money. And I was like, have you all looked at like he's making $15 million a year. It's not even a top 50 or even 100 contract, I don't think. And so, yes, $35 million is never going to avoid being a massive chunk, particularly of the Twins payroll. But I do think that if you have it be a static amount, if it's not front loaded or back loaded or something like that, if you have it be a static amount, there is some kind of built in through inflation, I guess, or just rising revenue. There's a built in kind of safeguard against the decline of a player's production or performance, which is you're paying him $35 million in 2022 money. You're also, or 2023 money. You're also paying him potentially $35 million in 2030 money. Well, we know in 2030, somebody can plug that into the inflation calculator and be like, what was $35 million worth back in 2023? It's going to be worth considerably more.
Well, I mean, we take a look at the Twins payroll this year. This last year it was $135 million, something like that for the opening day payroll. And we're already like, well, it should probably be 145 this year. It should be going up about 5 to 10%. That gets you that's about a 7%, 5-10% gain there.
Right.
So up to 145. Well, you do that 5 years in a row, you're at $195 million in payroll in 5 years.
Good luck
Do you know
with
what I mean? Well, this is what I'm saying. It sounds absurd, but that is in fact about a 5% increase over those 5 years.
If you were to get them to commit to that, but it certainly hasn't risen 5% previously, year over year, in general, like since let's say 2020, because 2010. No, I mean 2010. Moving into target field, the 2010 payroll was like 115.
Well, it definitely goes in waves, right?
Right. I'm saying if that were the case, if your starting point was year 1 of target field or even year 3 of target field, they'd be at like 200 million now. But I mean, that's capped. But yeah, I mean, we're all saying sort of the same thing. I'm just a little more skeptical. That's it.
And then there's other factors of it too. Like if you're going to make this sort of commitment to a free agent, if you're going to throw this amount of money at somebody, first of all, he's the 100th percentile in terms of what he brings to a clubhouse. And that's only going to get better as the years go on, when the contract maybe starts to look bad down the line, if he's moving off as shortstop or whatever.
Right.
The value that he brings to that clubhouse, that's like when you take a guy as a character guy in the draft or whatever, and you're like, we want to cultivate this guy into a team leader. We want to build around this guy. From what I've seen, Correa is the 100th percentile outcome of that.
You can take a shortcut to that because he's that.
Yeah.
Like you don't have to be like 5 years from now, we hope he
You don't have to be like,
that.
this is what we hope Royce Lewis turns into. Because you've got the fully realized monster form of that. And the other part of that is when you are maybe in a position where you're more certain down the line, and we want to throw $35 million a year at a guy or whatever, the market for that sort of player, I think is going to start getting whittled down too as people start doing kind of what the Rays and the Braves do, where you get out ahead of these kind of monster free agents you give them those extensions. They're hitting free agency at 30, 31 instead of 28, 29.
We talked about this relative to the shortstop market the other day.
Yeah.
Which is sort of what Doe's saying, which is for years, for the 20 years I've been doing this, particularly like shortstop, center fielders, like 5-tool players, they so rarely reach free agency, prior to their mid-30s, like a second free agency. Because teams will, look at it with the Twins. The Twins were like, Polanco's pretty close to a great all-around. Let's try to sign him to long-term. Buxton, same type of thing. That took a little doing, but same thing. They so rarely reach free agency, and the last two, this offseason and last offseason, have been so out of the norm, particularly at shortstop, which we talked about. There's been 4 or 5 each of the last 2 off seasons in their prime, 27 to 30-year-old legitimate all-star MVP caliber shortstops. And that's not going to be the case next year. It's not going to be the case the year after that. Now, there's always going to be great players as free agents. But, if you're ever going to do this, it checks almost every box. Now, I know people might say, Carlos Correa is a top 20 player, but is he a top 10 player? Is he a top 5 player? All that stuff. You can argue about that. Is he the second best shortstop, the 5th best short, whatever it is. That's fine. But if you believe there's any value in all the other stuff, the margin stuff, or the intangible stuff, which you can't quantify, by definition. Yep. But like Doe said, he doesn't dislike Minnesota. Well, that's an eliminating factor for 80% of free agents like him.
We've seen it at the top, amongst the top free agents year after year after year.
He's comfortable here. He likes the ballpark. He seems to like the management team. Right. We just talked about he's got good friends on the team, including Buxton, who's going to be around for most of a long-term contract and all that stuff. And then you start to talk about the other, the soft factors, which are not only is he liked in the clubhouse, which a lot of guys are liked in the clubhouse, but he seems to be someone around whom things revolve in the sense of he can go up to someone and say, hey, I've been looking at your swing, or I've been which a lot of Donaldson type traits, which were played up, including by me, and I still think those are valuable, but they were presented in a way from Donaldson that were not always, as digestible, I guess. And, we're talking about Joe Pohlad taking over ownership and what that means in terms of being more aggressive, more forward-thinking, more tech-savvy, more all this stuff, more new school. If you were to sign Carlos Correa to a 10-year, $300 million contract and Joe Pohlad takes over as the owner, you will not find anyone more tech-savvy, analytic-driven, wants to be on the cutting edge of baseball stuff than that. And he's talked about, hey, if I stick around here, there are some things I'd like to see them incorporate from a analytics standpoint, from a coaching standpoint, from a roster standpoint. And it can be dangerous. I lived through the Kevin Garnett era with the Wolves. It can be dangerous to turn your star player into a de facto GM. Sure. It can be very LeBron James is the worst GM in the history of sports. But
so is Michael Jordan.
Right. Well, literally, he became the GM. But I do think there's value in the guy who's not going anywhere for 10 years or 8 years, the guy who's your best player, the guy who's your face of your team, the guy who the clubhouse revolves around, also being a guy who might go up to Rocco Baldelli and say, what do you think about this? And have Baldelli go, yeah, I actually respect that.
And not
let
pout
alone
about
to
it
the
either.
ownership level. And
not pout about it if it doesn't get his way, or
I did think Correa was pretty good about this was not what he signed up for in terms of a 1-year stay in Minnesota. Now you can debate about whether he miscalculated how good the Twins were and all that, but I didn't get the sense. Obviously he was frustrated, especially in September. But his personal performance was phenomenal in August and then just unbelievable in September. Right. So he certainly didn't sulk in that regard. And I didn't get the sense that clubhouse-wise, things unraveled.
Yeah, I really didn't get the sense that it soured him on everything. Because even toward the end, I think he's an aware enough guy to understand how you look at the opening day, you look at what the roster should have been on paper after the trade deadline, and then you look at the guys that were actually in that clubhouse with him because of injuries on October, whatever the last day was. And when you were talking about all these things too, the other key part of it to me is that there's nobody that they're developing in the next 5 years, 10 years right now that we have a hint of that's going to be that guy. That's going to be the Wander Franco, the Ronald Acuna, the Mike Trout. Right. Look at this guy. Right. He's coming up. He's going to be all up. He's going to be the guy that we
hope like Royce Lewis or Brooks Lee or something like that. And obviously if Buxton's healthy, But as we've seen with prospects, like there's a long,
maybe
long
Emmanuel
way.
Rodriguez is that guy, but they just
Right.
haven't had the ability to draft somebody like that. They haven't had the ability to sustain the development of players that may have had that potential or may have come in with that sort of potential or that sort of thing. And if
Right.
you have the fully realized version of that,
It's a little-
it might
I mean,
be the best you do.
When the Phillies were making their run and you guys went to go watch them, we were talking about Bryce Harper after that.
Yeah.
And the fact that Bryce Harper somewhere along the way became like villainized
Yeah.
because people were like, who's this kid who thinks he's hot shit?
And I think
he played into that a little bit.
And listen, Philadelphia is more than happy to villainize somebody.
Well, right. But
you know what I mean?
this was even like in what?
Right.
I mean,
no,
you get
even
on the
before,
cover of-
but even after he signed with the Phillies,
Right.
that the media there was
Right.
cast a critical eye towards Bryce Harper on a regular basis.
But realistically, I mean, he was the 1-1, which is the first overall pick,
right.
and lived up to all the hype and then
Right.
some, which is almost like, other than like LeBron, I mean, there's a few players. I mean, there's Joe Mauer was a great number 1 pick, but there was some unrealized upside in Joe Mauer, in part because of, a large part because of the injuries. And now Harper's injured too. But what I'm saying is, the day they drafted Bryce Harper and he's on the cover of Sports Illustrated, he's 17 or whatever, he was almost like
He's got a target on him.
already had a target on him.
Yep.
And he's going to be a first ballot Hall of Famer. He's going to win, already won multiple MVP awards. And I think there's a certain, I mean, Baldelli talked about this in spring training when Correa first arrived. Baldelli was like, when I was with the Rays, I scouted Correa at some high school thing. And the quote that I always thought was funny, he goes, I was like, did he have that 1-1 look? Which is like first overall pick. There's only certain guys who have that. And Correa has reached 100% of the potential of that.
Yep.
And I think that is in itself like a certain so rare personality type combined with the ability and the production. And it's like, there's not going to be, I think the most likely scenario is that the Twins are just never going to sign. I mean, never's a long time.
Sure.
But, my lifetime, which is at least probably another like 18 months, are never going to sign a guy to a top 10 contract in all of baseball. And so that includes Correa, which is why I'm saying it's 5%, and I don't think they're going to pivot to whoever. But if you ever are going to do it as the Minnesota Twins, the year to do it is after you've test-driven a great player like Correa,
Right.
and at the end of it, he said, yeah, I wouldn't mind you just buying the car.
Right.
And you're putting in place a 40-year-old owner instead of a 60-something-year-old owner. You got $50 million in unspent payroll room just to get to next year.
Yeah.
You're coming off back-to-back disappointing seasons, so certainly
The stars are absolutely aligned.
right. So my thing is
Right.
like it won't be so much that it's disappointing if they don't specifically sign Correa. That will be disappointing to people.
Sure.
But I think if they don't sign Correa and then I'm assuming they don't follow that up with giving, Bogarts or whoever $200 million. That's a possibility, but I don't think that will happen. Then I think the reality of the situation like resets in. Whereas like
Right.
the things that people have been saying about the Twins for 50 years had a brief like intermission because of Correa.
Right.
And now we're still in that where people are like, I don't think it'll happen, but it could happen. And if
Right.
it doesn't happen this time, then I don't know how you ever can sort of hype yourself up for the possibility of signing another top 10 player to a top 10 contract. And so I think, I don't know, not that would maybe make me increase my offer X dollars, but it seems like a factor if you were the Twins because you're almost like cursing yourself by raising the possibility that this exists if it's only going to be not come to fruition. Because then people are like, well, I'm never going to believe that again.
And again, it's a chance you never get back with the
Right.
circumstances
That's
right now.
So outside of signing Correa, you got any sense of the moves that the Twins might make, either from a specific or a very general sense?
Do you think Kyle Farmer will be the opening day shortstop? That's what he's asking.
No, well, I mean, it might be part of it. But just in general, what do you anticipate their strategy being this offseason?
Or what should their strategy be? You can take
Well,
that
I would
route.
like both.
It's
I'd like to
catcher and
both
right-handed
those.
bat, as I think everybody's talked about. But I think ultimately, at the end of the day, it is kind of reactive to what comes of the Correa situation. I don't know that you can plan out these situations,
But
but
there's
I
a
don't know-
95% chance that it's not going to be. Like you can pretty much plan that much, right?
Sure.
Sure.
Although the timing of it, you might not be able
Exactly.
to.
Yeah,
right,
and
plan
that's the thing. Yeah, when you ask about the winter meetings earlier and that sort of thing, like what do you expect to happen? I think the tough part of this situation is that you can talk about creativity or whatnot and have these discussions all you want, but it's going to come down to kind of Judge setting the market and then the power players that missed out on Judge trying to figure out what they're going to do. I think Correa and Boris are too savvy to undercut that by getting out ahead of that in any way and not letting their market fully materialize. It's going to drive up the prices. And at the end of the day, I think because the Twins offseason hinges so much on whether they're actually going to remain a player for Correa in that or not. Like, you don't want to make like a move that's going to maybe prohibit you from.
Well, that's what we talked about in the last show. Is like, at what point
do they have to move on?
This is subjective.
Guys are coming off the board. Jose Abreu's coming off the board.
Right. That's already and somebody that was probably on their list.
I mean, if your plan is to try for Correa, and if you whiff on him, try to sign Dansby Swanson or Xander Bogaerts or trade for a shortstop, whatever it is, then you won't, like, you can literally wait until the day Correa signs somewhere else.
Right.
Or you can try to subjectively say this is not going to happen, which they could maybe already be having that conversation. Right. Like, you can start to see, like, this is just, it's not trending the way that the factors that we thought would have to occur for this to click for us with him, whether money wise or which teams are interested in him or whatever it is, are not happening. And I do think there's a danger. Well, there's only a danger if you're planning to spend aggressively, but the danger is if you literally wait for him to sign somewhere else, you may not be in position to pivot because, I guess I agree that Judge will sign first. Although I wonder, like, because Judge is most likely spot is the Yankees.
Agent, by the way. It's not Boris, right?
I don't think.
So that makes me hopeful that name will kept
Boris has Bogarts.
Right, I know.
Which is weird.
Yeah.
And he has Rodon.
Yes, he does Rodon,
and
too.
one other really high profile.
Nemo. Yeah,
Finding Nemo.
Yeah, right.
But I guess this is a off season where you would hope that your established relationship with Scott Boras as the Minnesota Twins pays off.
Because Boris is a guy that likes to control the market. I mean, that's what he did with those crazy I think it was the 2019 winter meetings where it was like the Strasburg and Rendon and there's one more in there that he just bang, bang, bang right out of the way. And because he was kind of the block in the market and he got everybody to play up off of each other. And he has the opportunity that could be him if Judge is off the board and he's playing these teams off of each other.
If you're like Xander Bogaerts and you're the second or third free agent, I'm sure he's had pitch to him from Boris what the plan is, because your fear if you're Bogarts is like, is he just going to be concentrating on Correa and then one day just go, all right, now we'll work on you. But I think, Doe's point, I mean, I think all agents, good agents do this, but Boris, I'm so convinced that he has simulated this stuff with, probably ways we can't even envision with the information they have, and has figured out, if I pull this string, then this is going to happen, and then I can pull this string. Yeah. I don't know that necessarily goes to the Twins' favor, because I think the less complicated this gets, I know the Twins are talking about creativity and stuff, but the more complicated this gets with Correa, I think the less chance the Twins, and I don't mean creativity, but the more things are being
for him, the simpler option. How about you just guarantee me 11 years, $32 million a year, 252?
That's right.
Great.
That's the thing. If he wants to win and help build a franchise or whatever, he can say he likes it in Minnesota. He's also been here in Minnesota for a year. He knows the realities of the market. He knows that it's difficult. It's more difficult to build a winner here than it is in Chicago or San Francisco or New York or LA or Texas or that sort of thing.
I also imagine that, given his experience last year, Correa would just as soon have a contract done as early in the offseason as he could have it done.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? I don't know that he's necessarily. Listen, he's a cool customer.
No, but he obviously
I don't
wasn't
think
happy.
he's not going to be somebody that's going to panic on this.
No, but he fired his agent after a while.
Yeah, exactly. Like I wouldn't. Whether he would admit it or not, and whether or not he's had discussions with Scott Boras about this or not, I have to imagine he wouldn't mind having a deal done by like middle of December. You know what I mean? So he just doesn't have to think about. He's been thinking about this for 2 years now. I would just soon get it done.
Yeah, maybe.
There's probably some incentive there.
Yeah, but me and you, we think of like not rich people.
Yeah,
that's our problem. I would like to get a deal done. All right. I was going to ask you about Emilio Pagan, but it's okay.
Me? About Emilio Pagan?
you've said
You're
enough.
looking at me. I think
yeah.
I've been pretty clear.
Well, I can't talk to Hayes about it anymore because Hayes won't talk to me about Emilio Pagan. Every time I tweet about it, he's like, another one of these? So, yeah, I don't know. Were you...
Did you roll your eyes?
No.
Were you shocked?
He never would. Joe's a professional. Were you surprised that they brought back Emilio Pagan?
No.
Okay.
I don't think it would have surprised me either way, honestly. Yeah. I mean, and I've talked to them about this. Just the fundamental philosophy of this Twins front office is that relievers are volatile. And
it's true.
And you count on the stuff more than you do the results, to whether for better or worse. They have been bit by that before.
Yes.
But
Last 2 years now.
But they don't let the results dictate the process. And you can make arguments about that, but they feel soundly about the process in evaluation, I think, that they have in place that aligns with modern pitching, pitch creation, pitch selection, what they feel creates a successful pitcher. And I mean, we pound on this over and over again, right? On paper, there's no reason he shouldn't be. He was making tweaks with I think it was like a little curveball and toward the end of the year, and he's been... He's trying to add to this foundation of the fastball and the little cutter and the splitter that kind of works for him and feeling it out, and
the 3-run home run.
And again, I think it changes. I think it changes that you're getting Jorge Alcala back next year. You figure out what you got in Jorge Lopez. You hope Giovanni Moran takes the next step. And if you're bringing him back as like a bridge, like, okay, you slot him in the 5th or 6th inning when you're down and you got a bridge, and there's. You hope for upside that maybe gets him back to the later innings, and it's not going to cost you a bundle. I'm fine with that, because I think the upside is there, and you're going to figure out early on in the year in lower pressure situations whether this is the year where the variance swings the other way or not. I mean, it's an upside play, and I can't fault them for that.
I think that all is logical, which is not surprising me from Doe, because Doe's a logical guy. But I think...
But Gleeman wants blood.
He wants
a blood sacrifice.
The two things I would say are, one, I think we're vastly, not we, like this table, but people are vastly, or the Twins, are vastly overestimating how good Emilio Pagan has been when he's been good and how often he's been good. This was not a one-year blip. He was terrible for San Diego in the second half the year before, and the year before that he had a 4-something ERA. And so, yeah, I absolutely believe that in the right circumstances, he can be an effective setup man. I mean, he's done it before, from, like Doe said, from a stuff standpoint, from a process over result standpoint.
Unfortunately, those circumstances are it's 2019. He's
right,
3 years younger, and
those
he's pitching for a
circumstances have been
different team.
very difficult to get a handle of.
Right.
And then I would also just say, like, why him? Like, what if that's what you're hoping for? If you're hoping to start a guy off in a middle relief low leverage role to protect him, and then you're hoping by the end of the season, this guy that we've brought back, this controversial bring back who's making $4 million, we hope he can pitch the 7th inning effectively. You tell me you can't find someone else with all this great process and pitch work for $4 million to bring him back? I think it's fine to say process over results, but I also think there are some soft factors here that I would accuse the Twins of not being particularly good at, not in this circumstance, but in general, where you go, like, you're talking about points of percentages, fractions of percentages. Like, we think Emilio Pagan is 4% better than a guy we could get for similar money. And for the Twins, they'd go, well, why would we not bring the guy back who's 4% better? And I would just say, yeah, but what if that 4%, there's a 5% factor of just, it ain't happening. Yeah. Which, I don't know. But I will also say, like, I think
it feels personal to me, Aaron.
Yeah.
It feels personal.
Emilio Pagan's a great dude. I think he's a great guy. He might not say the same about me if he knows who I am. But
I think it's just hubris.
It is. I mean, there's a certain amount of hubris in it.
It's just hubris.
It's not like personal hubris. It's
it's organizational
what
hubris.
you've built. And like Doe said, they're and we talk about this a lot. They're so confident. We talked about this with Wes Johnson. They were so confident in their ability to build scrap heap bullpen guys or sign, Matt Shoemaker and fix them. But there's so little evidence that they're actually good at that. And so I just wonder, like, at what point do you say the things we think we're good at or that we want to be good at, we're not actually that good at it? And then the other thing with Pagan is I think people are just going nuts with – it's like one of these things where we talked about this, the worse a catcher hits, the better people perceive their defense. The worse Emilio Pagan performs, the more people seem to go, but his stuff is so good. Yeah. I don't think his stuff is that good. It's good. I mean, it's not, but he doesn't have the best stuff in the Twins bullpen. If Alcala is back, he won't have the second best stuff in the Twins bullpen.
If Lopez is back, he won't have the third
best.
I mean,
like, I think he has good stuff. He clearly above average good stuff, but he's not the 95th percentile in velocity. He's not, I think he's a swing and miss guy, but he leaves the ball to the plate. You're right. This has become, I don't know why I had to ask Dope. All right, let's talk about Jeopardy.
Tyler McGill comes back. He's not the fifth best stuff.
Trevor McGill. There is a Tyler McGill.
Yeah, that's right. Brother, that's right. You're right.
Yeah, they're brothers. Yeah, both very large men.
Okay.
Yeah, they throw hard and they're big guys. Okay. Well, so first of all, Doe now is the chapter president of the BBWA Twin Cities.
That's right. I forgot about that.
Twin Cities chapter. Yeah.
Which he took that from Dan Hayes, thankfully. It was one
Did
of those.
He pass an actual gavel to you? Do you
So
have the actual gavel?
On top of Dan's wardrobe in the Tom Schreier bachelor pad in which they cohabitate together during
America's favorite couple.
Yeah.
The odd couple, truly the odd
zone coverage owner, Tom Schreier.
It is now sitting in the center console of my car.
Okay, all right.
I look at it and it reminds me of the
I thought you were going to say. I thought you were going
to
say the gavel was on top of the TV at the Loon that night. And it was
I'll check back in on it in June.
That is when the torch passing took place. It was at the upstairs at the Loon.
Mostly it's in the center console of my car because that's where I put it that night, and I have not moved it since. But I can also look at it when I get in my car and think of, I can probably pull some strings with the Aaron Gleemans and Betsy Hell fans.
Oh yeah, you could make our life miserable.
You get pulled over and the cops start searching your car and they're like, "All right, sir,
what is this gavel?
What is this weapon you've got in here?
Drugs in here?" Yeah, well, it's an interesting job which I hope to never have, and you guys clearly hope I never have it. But it rotates. But I think I'll take a year off for that one. But when it gets to me, it's an interesting job because it's not clear to me that Dan did anything. And I don't mean that as an insult to Dan. I think Dan would admit that. He at the end of the year, he had to pass out the awards ballots and stuff. And he had to
I can assure, here's what Dan had to do.
But there weren't any big crises
but
to happen. Whereas the year before that, which was
Betsy.
Was it Betsy? Yeah.
Betsy.
Who was 2020? Lavelle?
Patrick Borzi.
Oh, Borzi was somewhere back there.
They had a lot of COVID-related stuff that they had to deal with. Are you allowed in the clubhouse? Where did the mask? Whereas Dan was just I don't know. And so I'm wondering, is this going to be a crisis year or not?
Here's my what I suspect is the actual job.
Yeah.
You field all the annoying complaints by all the other writers about anything.
Yeah, but here's
and I wanted
no doubt.
Which would drive you nuts.
But here's the thing. And I'm the most annoying writer that we have in this market. You know that. John's nodding. It's an audio medium, so you have to say yes.
Right.
I didn't ask one. I don't have anything. I try to stay out of sight, out of mind in this circumstance.
I wasn't thinking of you asking a bunch of annoying questions.
Well, that's nice. That's the first time anybody's ever said that. But
baseball writers always find something.
Right.
Yeah. Well, you're talking
how much has that happened so far? It's been a month? Nothing so far.
It's going to be in season. Again, it's just a matter of if there's a good reason to liaise about something, whether it's PR department needing to do something with us, or us having
the windows or the temperature.
Yeah, it's not 2020 or 2021, but man, if you open the door for baseball, we kind of scratched the surface of that at the dinner that we had. But have you guys ever? You wouldn't have, John, but Aaron, you haven't been to a BBWA national meeting at the winter meetings either.
Which is
9 a.m. Tuesday. I have been to one of those, and you cannot possibly underestimate the capacity for older school baseball writers I just remember distinctly sitting there. I've been on the job for about a month at that point. It was the 2019, the winter meetings heading up to the 2019 season. And we got into a 45-minute debate with old school columnists from various markets going up there. And what it came down to was, I can't remember what it was, but it was how chapter votes, how many votes each chapter of the BBWA would be allocated for some awards or something, some committee or whatever. And it's does each chapter get one vote? Does the chapter Does the representation of the chapter depend on the number of
many
members?
people?
We legitimately got into a full-on referendum on the Electoral College in the BBWA meeting, and I'm sitting there looking
I'm actually
around. I'm
relieved
like,
about that. I
what
thought it was
are
going to
we
be
doing?
about. I thought it was going to be landline phones versus ticker tape.
Well,
or
there is
something
some
like
of that.
right?
There is some of that.
It's a lot. It's a lot of just
I know
ticky-tack
people
stuff like that.
Whenever
on
the
national
voting
scale, I think.
happens, and people are unhappy with the votes, like for Cy Young or whatever it was, they're like, "Oh, these media, they don't buy." And I'm like, if you knew the gap between like the ends of the spectrum of like BBWA members,
Yes.
like I'm like it's like Doe and Royce, but worse, like bigger, because like Royce is like not even close to one of the 10 most old, like
Right.
truly old school. Because
Right.
like if you say to Royce, "Hey, you want to come on a podcast? You want to come on Zoom? You want to have a conversation about?" Royce is the one who recommends more streaming services to me
Right.
and shows
Yeah,
than anyone.
right.
So he's a billion years old, and he's
He's actually
curmudgeon.
plugged into technology, right.
Royce is like the 50th percentile for like curmudgeonly, which you cannot believe. But yes, I'm looking forward to my first ever meeting. I'll probably just shut
The
up.
point of all this being that it's probably BBWA chair is probably a tougher job in other markets. We do have it pretty easy because
Yeah.
it's an easy PR department to work with, easy
That's true.
beat group to work
Yeah,
with.
we are. I've said this like from my standpoint, but like starting this in 2020, really, I got pretty lucky with like Doe and Betsy, who have now
Yeah,
both been on
had
the
just
show.
started before
Hopefully,
you,
it's clear
right?
to anybody
Yeah.
listening that they're very nice, smart people. They had just started on the job, although I view them as like veterans because they had a whole year before me or something like that. But like, I think of the previous 20 years of doing this and the different iterations of the beat groups and that I could have stepped into and the reaction and my experience, how different it would have been 8 years earlier, 12 years earlier, 20 years earlier, whatever it is. Like I stepped into a group that I'm not going to say we don't complain about stuff and that we're like the greatest people of all time, but it seems to be a more like-minded, like, there's a big, actually decent sized age gaps and stuff like that. But because what did we say? Phil's 84 years old and Doe's 12. So that's pretty
It's
big.
only double digits?
Yeah. But yeah, so I don't know. I think now, having said this, I kind of do want to annoy Doe with some
You say all this
stuff during the season.
I don't like
You
where
gotta
I
watch
sit.
yourself because I'm gonna assign you manager of the year if you're on
No,
thin
I'll
ice,
reject
buddy.
it. I'll
You're on
reject
thin
it.
ice, buddy.
I told Dan I'll reject it.
He's going to complain about seating, but not about where he sits. He's going to complain about, like, I don't like those two being next to each other.
Aren't you guys gonna move to my side of the press box?
I think that's the
Something
big
like that? Oh.
discussion here.
That
That we're going to move from our spot in the middle. We used to be on the far end where no one talked
Yeah,
to us, which
yeah.
I kind of liked. Although
was gonna
you
say.
do realize how many hours you spend with one other person being Dan when it's just the two of you on that end.
Well, that's what should happen. Is you should take it upon yourself every homestand to rearrange the seating a little bit.
Every home-
That sounds like work. John.
like a ranking. Actually, yeah, it's a relegation system. It's like, listen, Betsy, you had a good seat, but you were really annoying these last 3 games. You got to go sit by Gleeman at the
or
other
if they
end.
do poorly in the little Twitter game you guys play,
Yeah.
the
Yeah,
little Twitter drafts you do.
That's true. The winner of the weekly draft,
They
although
get
we
the
couldn't.
best seat.
Yeah, they get the. I don't know what the best seat is at home on my couch.
I was going
Probably.
to say.
All right, let's talk a little Jeopardy instead of all this. This is the BS that I was. Talking
That's right. Yeah.
Yeah, I was going to ask you about David Shaw stepping down at Stanford, but we'll save that for another.
Oh, I have-
Because the
I
last
have
time I saw you,
thoughts,
we
buddy.
talked about this.
Hold on. What?
The football coach of
Oh,
Stanford.
I say, yeah,
Joe
yeah,
wasn't,
right.
wasn't a big fan. All right, here's the things about Jeopardy. So, like we said, Doe was on just normal Jeopardy last year
Right.
and faced Amy Schneider, who, spoiler alert, just won the Champions Tournament or Tournament of Champions.
Oh, did she?
Yeah.
Awesome. Yeah.
Oh, okay. Good.
So, I mean, Ken, I would still put up there, but I think among Jeopardy experts, it has to be her and Ken as the 1-2 in some order, right? As the greatest ever, or no?
I think I'd probably still put Holzhauer up there,
Okay.
but I think if you're gonna build a 1-2-3 Mount Rushmore,
Okay,
That's where you
fair.
start.
That's fair. So that's who Doe faced in his first one, which we talked about. He didn't know. I mean, he knew at the time she must have been good given the circumstances of she was on her 13th game or whatever
Yeah.
it was. But you didn't realize the extent to which
Right.
she would set records and everything.
took
Doe
her, took her all the way to Final Jeopardy.
Yeah, Doe put up a great fight. Could have won potentially,
Yes, right.
which was not true of 90% of the people she faced. And then at what point because the second chance, this is not a thing they had ever done before.
It's the first time they've ever done it.
And I think it was at least in part because this year, or the past 2 or 3 years, I guess, have become the super champion era, where you have people like Matt Amodio and Amy Schneider, and even going back, I guess Holzhauer was a while ago, but that kind of started it, I feel like.
Yeah, and there's a 16-game winner on right now, I think. Yeah.
Wow. There's been so many people to win double digit or even like 20 plus, and I'm sure like the top 10 streaks, there's got to be like 7 that are like the last 3 years, right? Or 6 or 7.
I feel like even like the last 1 or 2 years.
And so
been crazy.
I think Jeopardy saw that and thought, A, the popularity of the show is higher, so let's try to think of something creative. But B, there are people like Doe, many of them, who just got demolished by like the Jordan Bulls,
right?
And could have been a champion or a 5-time winner in a normal circumstances, but they just had no chance because they went up against just this opponent that was just steamrolling people. And because there were so many of those, there were dozens of those people to pick from. They were like, let's pick a few from each. A few people Amy beat, a few people Matt Amodio beat, a few people Matea Roach beat. Trying to think of all the people, and let's get them together. Because like, how many? So you lost to Amy, and then were chosen for the second chance. How many other people who lost to Amy were in the?
There were 2 of us.
Okay.
Yeah, there were 2 of us.
Out
It
of
was me and Pam Schoenberg. Out of the,
12?
she was a 40-day champion. So yeah, and that she was a 40-day champion. So of the 80 people she beat, there were 2 of us.
Right.
And it was 2 separate brackets of 9. So it was an 18-person pool total.
Well, and the other person that she beat, who was in the second chance tournament,
Andrew He,
won the second chance.
Oh, no, sorry. No, Rowan won the second chance tournament. So the 2 winners of the second chance tournament were Jessica Stevens and Rowan Ward. Rowan I played.
Who beat
Rowan
you?
lost to Amodio the first time.
Oh, right.
And Jessica Stevens was in the game where Amodio lost to Jonathan Fisher. Okay. She was the third person.
Wow.
She was the reason the tournament existed, actually. The producers have said that.
Oh, so was Andrew He's thing?
Really?
Andrew,
he had enough of a streak to make the tournament champions, and then lost to Amy.
Yeah, I think he won like 4. It was like somewhere in the 4 to 6 range.
You're right.
And then he led Amy into final and got it wrong, and then that's what opened the door.
I remember
started Amy. Yeah.
I obsessively talked about this last time Dill was on, because I remember like when Japanese players, prominent Japanese like Ichiro, started coming to MLB and were great. Hideki Matsui.
Sure.
I became obsessed with how many Hall of Fame players have we missed out on seeing because they just literally didn't have the opportunity. And then I took that to Jeopardy with people like Doe or Andrew He, who won 4 in a row, but clearly it turns out could have won 40 in a row.
Yeah.
Because he was great. I mean, he was great.
He goes blow for blow with Amy in the tournament.
In the tournament champions, he finished second. Yeah. And could have won. Probably feels like he should have won, I'm going to guess. But he lost to the greatest, let's say, the second or third greatest of all time. He might be the 4th greatest of all time,
right?
But he will never be perceived that way because that's how matchups work, basically. So, but when did Jeopardy reach out? Because I know you had said like relatively early, like I kind of hope they do some sort of second chance thing because maybe there had been some talk.
I think you guys had actually spitballed on that when I was on the first time.
Jeopardy producers must be listening to the podcast.
I think they originally broached it. I think they announced it sometime during, it was like either spring training or just before, I think, where I didn't know for sure.
So
but I went into spring training
because your last appearance was televised, what, December 21?
Yeah.
Right.
So I went into spring training with the idea of, I don't know anything for sure, but kind of knowing what they've said about this tournament, I feel like I have a decent shot. So maybe I should start, like flashcarding again or whatever.
That's true because Doe went like 2 years. Like I'm not saying he never went out, but like I think he went out much less. And he would be like, I got to go study flashcards. Yeah. Was there anything specific that you studied for the second chance that you hadn't really studied that much for the original one?
No, I was just much more efficient with my flashcarding.
What a sentence. Where's a sentence?
Because they were I was carrying around like Ziploc baggies of like paper flashcards the first time. Those take a long time to make. My girlfriend Kiana is in medical school right now, and she taught me about this app called Anki, which is it's like you pay $20 or whatever to sync it across your mobile phone and your laptop. and you can sync the cards.
Upload a
you can sync the
spreadsheet and
learning.
it turns into flashcards.
No, you still got to do it by hand. Actually, that's a tough part of it. But like the ability to do
Jesus.
it on the phone
Got it.
is easy, and you can like make very rich flashcards and that sort of thing. But
Cool.
my churn got up to like I think I was doing 4,000 flashcards a day by the end. By the end of it,
I just don't. I mean, I don't have a brain that could be on Jeopardy anyway, but I don't think that would help me. Like at some point, the saturation
How
of
many flashcards
it.
do you do an hour?
I mean, I just do it over a lot of hours.
Yeah.
Like when I'm sitting and it's like the fourth inning, I'll whip out the
I mean, that's
vice president.
500
stuff.
flashcards an hour over 8 hours.
Yeah.
Is 4,000.
Well,
Baseball game's
I would
long,
go
Josh.
home.
8 a minute.
I would go home and lie on my couch, and I would. Well, it's much more than 8 a minute. I'm popping through them like 20 a minute or something. One every.
He's just
If I know
basically-
it, I know it. If I don't, it recycles. Like
Oh,
they have
okay,
like
all right.
they have like a learning algorithm where it's like.
Okay.
If you know it, then they shove it to the back of the
Sure,
deck.
sure,
If you
sure, sure,
don't,
sure.
they repeat it at various
Okay,
intervals until you get it down.
But do you view it as like? Because like I remember as a kid doing flashcards for like state capitals or whatever, and I would like stare at it for a while and try to like. But do you almost view it as like self checkout at a grocery store? You just have to scan it through your brain. Like you just have to make your
Yes.
Make sure your eyes saw it and your brain registered.
You're
it.
not trying to do some mnemonic thing to remember it or something
No.
like that.
Well,
most of the
there are
time. You're
some
just trying
things
to,
like that.
You just okay.
There is I think my lit deck is like my literature deck is like 5,000 long, and at that point you have to like make weird word associations between like words in the title and author names and the sounds and that sort of thing to get them to stick.
Okay.
Maybe we're getting too into the weeds here, but like
No.
that's what it took, and because so much of Jeopardy is just word association.
Sure.
There are things that we call Pavlovs.
Yeah, we
after
were talking
having
about
Pav-
this like a month or two ago, where like I even noticed like Anne Boleyn,
in Berlin. Yeah.
that's always an answer for a certain subset. I don't know anything about Anne Boleyn. I don't know anything about that era. I don't know anything about anything history wise. But there are like certain keywords or dates or periods in a question that I say it has to be Anne Boleyn.
has to
And
be.
it's always Anne Boleyn. And so like I've heard the name Anne Boleyn 1,000 times now just from watching Jeopardy. And I could potentially get a question about Anne Boleyn correct, knowing
the fact
nothing
that you have
about her.
no
Because
idea.
like he said, it's a Pavlov
Right.
answer. Because it's just like, if it's this date or it's this country or it's the wife of so-and-so,
Yeah.
it has to be,
Even if you don't know it cold,
Right.
it's a lot of very educated guessing up there, and that's how you get.
But
to
do
that
you
point.
think, I think we talked about this too, like I got the sense of Amodio especially would just buzz in and then think
about it?
And are we at the point now, especially with these super champs who have a lot of confidence, are obviously very comfortable on the buzzer, comfortable on stage, just their overall, like it's their second home. Have we reached the point where like that's just going to be a strategy of someone who's good at the buzzer is let me just buzz in, get to the front of the line, and then use the 7 seconds or whatever they give you. That's probably longer than they give you to then figure out the answer. Because you could clearly see there were times where like these great champions would buzz in, and once in a while you buzz in and it leaves your head, or you thought you knew it and then you realize you don't. But I got the sense from him especially, but also some other players in the tournament champions, they would buzz in and then they would go, all right, what's the answer to this question? Because that to me is sort of, I mean, that's brilliant if you can do that. But I do feel like it could potentially be dangerous to the scope of the overall game, because if that becomes the strategy and you can kind of do that, then it reprioritizes what is valuable, because then it just becomes buzzer.
I don't think anybody's buzzing blind though. So here's how it goes when a question appears and you see it on
This is one of my questions. Yeah. How much can you read it versus how much do you have to listen to it?
No, you read it. You read it. So
and it's big enough and
So
such.
you got
it's
the big
obvious,
board.
right?
You got the big board, and
it's up there.
It doesn't blow up to the size of the screen like it does on TV. It's
Okay.
just you see the board, and then the little space for the clue changes into the text.
Okay.
But how it works is like with you see the clue, and within a split second, you know, okay, I know this answer, or I can buzz in and I can rack my brain and figure out this answer. I don't think anybody's buzzing in blind, being like, okay, I just need to get in and then I'll figure it out. But you know if you can know it. And I think you saw like Andrew He do that a lot in the tournament, where I think he we had a lot of mental cues for like, okay, like there were, I can't remember why, but like one example of this is like there's a book called like The Last Days of Pompeii or something, written by a guy named Bulwer Lytton. And I remember that by being like Pompeii, flash of light, blinding light in the eruption, bulwark light, and I think there's like mental cues like that some people have. Like, okay, I know that I know this,
or if you just saw
and then I'll
something that
run
was
through
about
the gears.
a U.S. president, you're like, I know U.S. presidents.
Yeah.
I will get this
So
one.
it does know
Because it takes a lot of like mental capacity to actually gear yourself up and buzz too. So you got to think about, okay, can I get to this answer? And then you have to dedicate your brain to getting the buzzer timing, feeling out the buzz, and then you're like, okay, now I can go through this process.
Because you get
I can
locked
go
out
through
if
the
you buzz
elections.
too early, right?
Yeah.
And so that's something I didn't realize as a kid watching Jeopardy, and now I watch for it, I guess because we talked about it with Doe last time. But like you see, especially in the Tournament of Champions where everybody knows everything, you see how often multiple people buzzed in with what is presumably the right answer. And the only thing stopping them from getting it was that the other person...
How do you know when you're allowed to buzz in?
They have rows of LED lights. There's like, they're invisible on TV, but like on the big scoreboard in the actual set, they have rows of like red LED lights that flash on and off as soon as the buzzer's
That's
active.
interesting. So when you buzz in and you got it, obviously like Ken will say, Doe. Yeah. But once out of like every couple of episodes, somebody will just start to answer.
Yeah.
And Ken will be like, oh, well, go ahead. And I presume that they tip you off that you got it a split second before he says you got it.
Well, you see like on the podium when you're looking at it, you
Lights
see like the
up.
row of red lights, right?
I see.
That's a bidirectional light. So it looks the same going toward the contestant on the
So if
podium.
your lights are lit,
and it
you were the
lights
one.
up like the whole top of the podium in red.
So yeah,
you know.
were you? I mean, I guess just in general, but also just about the buzzer. Like, did you find yourself much more comfortable? Like, not that you were like a veteran, but you'd at least done it once, so you knew like there aren't going to be any like massive surprises.
Oh,
here?
absolutely. Yeah. Just the whole tournament from start to finish. I think everybody there, because we generally knew of each other, because this is the most online a season of Jeopardy contestants has ever been. So there's Jeopardy Twitter gets into it. We interact with each other. So we knew of each other's existence. We'd watched each other's runs, that sort of thing. And the first time you go, you have no idea what to expect. You're under all this pressure. You're living out this thing that you've hyped yourself up for decades a lot of the time. And then the second time you're there, nothing is new anymore.
Right.
You've done it. You know exactly what to expect. You know exactly like where the steps are to the podium, even
Did you
little
know
things like that.
before you showed up who you were going to be facing?
No.
Okay.
So that's a funny thing.
Yeah.
So my match was, I was eventually the final heat match of the whole thing against Rowan Ward, who eventually won my week of the tournament, and Nikki Porcaro. And so they taped the 2 weeks of the tournament were completely separate on consecutive days. They flew in the first week of contestants a day before. And so one of those guys reached out to me on Twitter being like, hey, would you like to come and play a trivia night if I got some people together? And I was like, I'm really tired right now, but I might take people tomorrow. And he's like, oh, no, I'm in week 1, so I won't be there. And I'm like, okay. So I just kind of reach out to other people like who are like, I'm like, okay, do you want to come out to like a bar trivia or something? It'd be a fun way to get to know each other.
So you knew the 18 names, but you didn't know which ones were on that.
Well, I think when they released the bracket, that's when we knew. So I started reaching out to some of those people, and I was like, okay, hey, like you guys are also taping the day I am. Do you want to come out to trivia? 2 people came out, and it ended up being Nikki and Rowan, and none of us had any idea that we would eventually be the
that's
matchup.
great.
We're sitting at a table, and we take a picture. I think Nikki tweeted it, and I like to imagine some producer who knew that we were going to be the matchup just seeing that, being like,
Yeah.
what do they know? When did they know it?
Well, and also I remember
That's funny.
when we watched it together, like Rowan was dominant
Yes,
and
right.
proved to be a dominant
Right.
person too. But I was like, man, that must have been rough. And you said, oh, I knew Rowan from, I believe you said from the trivia community, which I was like, nerd
Rowan,
alert.
they are a very, very, very well known within
And
the
that
trivia
I didn't
community.
realize either. When I remember last time you were on, you were like, yeah, I might kind of get into the game show trivia, like maybe. And I didn't realize the extent to which, like, whether online or even some in person, like, there are competitions going on.
I want to hear about the trivia circuit.
Yeah, it's crazy. And, like, obviously Jeopardy is going to be the top of the heap for that sort of thing.
Yeah, that's the holy grail.
But it's almost this, like, people who are capable of being on Jeopardy can't just wait 30 years to be on Jeopardy.
Right.
So what they do is they just obsessively study all this stuff in these like mini competitions, or in some cases, maybe not even that many of competitions. And yeah, it's like being in Mensa or something. Like there aren't that many people who are going to be, I mean, there are a lot of people into bar trivia, obviously.
Right.
But there aren't that many people into bar trivia who could also be at the level of a Jeopardy contestant. And so it does make sense that like you'd start to see the same names pop up over and over and be like, oh yeah, I just lost to them at this whatever online competition last week.
Right.
And, oh, now they're next to me on Jeopardy.
Right. Well, so the biggest like community for that sort of thing, or the biggest league, is called the Learned League, which is like an online invitation only. It's super built out. It's like a passion project of one guy who I think started off as like a paralegal or something like that. And like I think it was like just like something that like they did in their like office together to just kind of pass the time. They built like a web app for it or whatever. And over the years, especially over the last like 3 or 4 years, it's just exploded. It just started off as this little office thing, and I think it's now like there's like 19,000 players in it this year. It's like an invite.
Sponsors?
It's an
Does it have
invite
prizes?
only thing. No, it's just
purely
you just
for
do it
pride.
for bragging
For the
rights.
love of the game, John.
Love of the game. All right.
I think you get a scarf if you win like the whole.
These are true
Yeah.
nerds, John.
Yeah,
They're
you do. Yeah,
You get to maintain your amateur status.
Yeah, so you have to be invited, and then it's actually remarkably built out. Like everybody gets the same questions every day. You play head-to-head matchups
you
against.
told me
You're
about this,
divided
right.
into like different leagues and different rundles, like levels of each league. There's promotion, there's relegation. It's absolutely. I got a lot of like Twins adjacent people into it. I'm facing in my matchup today Nina Zimmerman
Oh,
of
really?
the Twins PR
PR,
department.
communications
Yeah.
department.
So is that why when you say you knew some of the other contestants that were doing this?
Yeah,
is that
so-
you know of them. Through
Oh, a
that
lot of them are
particular
there,
leagues?
but like, I mean, it's not like a very like interactive part, but there's other kind of like Zoom oriented leagues that I'm in that a lot of these people are part of. We chat on kind of like, there's a very active portion of Jeopardy Twitter. We have a Discord chat now.
It's amazing. I mean,
yeah,
I would
people
make
just
fun,
kinda
but
opt in, yeah.
we've done the same thing with baseball.
Of course,
so
yeah,
what's the
exactly right.
But yeah, it's
So when you're not on Reddit,
Yeah.
There's
But
been
by the way,
Reddit.
so
When
I
you're
brought
not
up
on Twitch
Learned.
Reddit.
I brought up Learned League for a reason, because we're in that league, and Rowan, who I faced and ultimately lost to, literally wrote the glossary of the reference section
Right.
for that
Oh, that's
league,
awesome.
and it's just like,
So
okay,
you
yeah.
saw them and you were like, oh, sure, this is going to be a long day. Like, this is going to be. Yeah,
Well,
that was-
so because they released the bracket, and I have trivia friends who like saw my first round matchup, and they're like, and they immediately reach out as soon as they see the bracket, and they're like, "Oh, you got Rowan? Oh no, I'm so sorry." And I was just like, "That's the extent to it." Yeah.
right?
It was interesting to see. Like, I was not very good at predicting, even having watched, and I rewatched some of them, like I rewatched Doe's and stuff. Like, even, I wasn't really able to predict much. And even the Tournament of Champions, I made Doe handicap the field before it started. Because the top three got buys, Amodio, Mateo Roach, and Amy Schneider, and only Amy Schneider made the finals out of that.
Okay.
But I thought it was interesting, we talked about Andrew He, who could have had a huge streak and could have been a buy type of person if not for running into Amy in his first week, basically. But then Sam, was it Buttrey? Was that his name?
Yeah, Sam Buttrey.
Who finished third. He was the third contestant in the Tournament of Champions. Was never even in normal Jeopardy because he was in, was it the Professor's Tournament or the Teacher's
Professor's
Tournament?
yeah.
And so I thought he was amazing, especially for being a dude, it looked like maybe in his 60s or something. First of all, I thought he was funny, which I like too. But, like, there's so many factors. I feel like it would drive me nuts if you're Sam Buttrey and you would say to yourself, okay, well, I won the Professor's Tournament, but would I have been better off just being a regular contestant on Jeopardy? I could have won 30 games on Jeopardy. And I'm sure some of that is satiated by finishing third in the Tournament of Champions, but like there's so many weird factors with the matchups. Like, I'm not going to kiss Doe's butt, but like Doe clearly could have won in many matchups.
Sure.
Not only the first time around, if you just faced an average two opponents, you probably would have won, but even in the second chance, there are probably multiple sets of three where you would have come out the winner of that. And yet it's like you have no control over it.
Right.
And it's not even clear to me that Jeopardy themselves, they control it, but it's not, their predictive ability on that is probably pretty low anyway. Like, I don't know that they would have said.
It's not clear that they're doing a seeding and trying to
I
average
think
it out and such.
We think they did. They never told us, but they were very intentional about the matchups.
Okay.
So they were trying
Yeah.
to at least balance it, maybe. Or
Yeah,
something.
to that point, the one thing that did make it tough after the fact was that I felt incredible on the buzzer that day. You can't tell from my match, but I felt incredible on the buzzer. During warm-ups, I could not be beat on the buzzer.
Okay.
Like I think I played like 2 rounds in warm-ups, and I think I only got outbuzzed like twice total across the 2 rounds or something like that. I felt phenomenal. And because in warm-ups, they took care to like avoid crossovers of the actual matchups that were going to happen in the quarterfinals. Rowan was also cleaning up on the buzzer when they were up there. Nikki was also cleaning up on the buzzer when
really?
she was up there.
I
And
was wondering if you were doing
Yeah.
those practice versus Rowan and he was rope-a-doping you.
No, but they just like they had the same like they did a lot of buzzer practice, and I think they're just like a little faster than I was overall. But it was wild to like kind of look at how the practice games went, and then to see all of us kind of crammed into one game. And I think there's some like sense of like because people were coming up to us and be like, "Oh, I hope I don't." Like,
Okay, so
yeah.
I think you now need to have a conversation with Corey Cove about establishing a Power Trip initial circuit.
Yeah.
Or somehow getting Power Trip initials built into the trivia circuit. Because first of all, he would absolutely love to do something like that. That would interest him in terms of entrepreneurship, right?
We played it at, we talked about this. We played it during like rain delays and stuff. I'm going to take it to San Diego because I'm sure we're going to have a lot of time on our hands. But
Because you're specially invited to the Power Trip initials
yeah,
game.
and he did what we knew he would do. John, you literally bet on it.
I literally bet money on it.
I had no idea.
If I would have found a sucker one, who did you bet? Hockey?
No, Sauce.
Well, Sauce was sitting there like, I got money on this. And I thought he was joking, and then at the end he's like, I just lost $50.
I would have bet so much on Doe. Not because I mean you actually faced a good group.
I picked Doe versus the field.
Right.
And I thought to myself, that's probably not the smartest bet. I should have probably asked for a little bit. It's just because it's hard for anybody to be more than a 50% chance of winning that. Even AJ hasn't won 50%.
Yeah, because there's so many people in the
50% of his groups. You're right. There's 5 people playing.
No, but
right?
I said when I was in there and I lost to Creso in the semifinal or whatever, off mic, I said to Corey, like, hey, we've been playing, and he had retweeted Doe, picture on Twitter of us playing at Target Field, the home game. And I was like, you got to have Doe on. And he's like, oh, we'll have Doe on. And I said, like, honestly, he will win. And I don't mean like he will win his matchup. Like if you put him in the tournament, he should be like the number 3 seed. And Corey's like, okay, we've heard that before. And I'm not saying.
So I made the bet with Sauce.
Yeah.
And then we go to commercial.
advantage
And we
of
go to
Sauce.
commercial break. And I say, how much do you guys know about Doe?
Yeah, right. Nothing.
And I start talking a little bit about you when you graduate high school and go to Stanford and blah, blah, blah. And he's like, and Corey's like, and Sauce is like, I didn't know any of that.
Right. That's my point. It's like,
and Corey's like, hold on, this guy's really smart.
but there's
I'm
certain
like,
things like, look, I'm not saying we love Paul Lambert, but he's a radio personality named Meat Sauce. You know what I mean? And I love Marnie, who you played against also, right?
Yeah,
Marnie's super smart. But she's
and
played
a little competitive.
Well, she's very
Just a little
competitive. But Marnie is just normal person smart. Do you know what I mean? And so, like, it's like if I would have seen like a young LeBron James and there was like a one-on-one tournament of like the local rec league,
Right.
I'd be like, yeah, I'll bet him against the field, and people would be like, you're crazy. And it's like, yeah, it's not really the same. And I also saw firsthand when we started playing it. I got the home game that I bought off initialsgame.com. There's a plug for you, Corey. And we were playing it at Target Field in rain delays and stuff. And the first time Doe, like, he got a couple correct, but I could almost see like you trying to size up the game. And then like within like the next time we played it, I think you got 10 right or something like that. And I was like, this is just ridiculous. Like
You had a little bit of a slow start in the Power Trip initials, right? Like you didn't get the first
was
2
a hard-
or
It depends on the
questions.
Yeah, it was a hard set of questions.
And I mean,
I think Sauce was saying afterwards that it was one of the harder sets. I
thought-
think Corey was also saying
I
that
only
too.
got,
Yeah.
even at home, which is much easier, obviously. I only got 2 correct.
sometimes the initials just click and sometimes they don't. That one's just clicked for me. When I was listening to that, I think I'd have gotten 3 or 4.
Yeah, well.
Which is good for me.
Did Haley Burton help you with that, John?
No, she did not.
So yeah, I want to do, now that we've both gone on and won our debuts impressively, I would like to do a Twins beat writer or Twins writer. Maybe we'll get John on too. group because we could get Betsy, we could get Megan. Phil probably won't want to play.
Megan would be good
She
at
would
it.
play, yeah.
Megan would be
Dan would be all right
legitimately
at it.
You could also get Marnie, who's played a lot. You could get Audra, who plays a lot.
I don't know. I don't think Audra will play me again.
We might have to make a little small tournament, not just like one game. We might need to make a group of 10,
maybe for spring
or
training.
2 groups of 4 or something.
Here's what I was saying. Though I felt more pressure on the initials game than I did on Jeopardy,
Well, there's
especially the second
more
time.
potential for mockery from people you
That's
actually
exactly
know.
what it is.
Like I would never. I can't mock you for not winning Jeopardy.
That's exactly my point here.
Like,
Yeah.
I can't even get on Jeopardy.
Right.
But I can mock you for losing the initials game
right.
because shit, I can win that.
I was just like, Aaron has won one of these.
Yeah, so it's
I
a lot.
cannot lose. Otherwise, there are going to be like 80 people in the press box that will tell me about this every day.
Right. That's exactly right. Well,
Whenever I tweet out a stat, Aaron's going to like be in the comments being like, or whenever I like Mastodon out a stat or Instagram out a whatever we're going to be. I don't know. Aaron is just going to be, yeah, try winning. How about you? How about we turn those into initials?
Is the dude that ex-NHL guy, is his name Ryan Carter that I played? Is that a person
I think so.
fan?
Yeah,
His
yeah,
name was
I think
Ryan
so.
something.
Right, yes.
But
Ryan, I think it was
don't
Ryan
know.
Carter.
I'm not trying to like.
Yeah,
But he said to me during the commercial break.
I don't think I know him. So.
He said to either me or Sauce, like, should I be embarrassed that this guy, meaning me, who we've never met, crushed us because I beat him like they're combined? And I think it was Sauce was like, you should not be embarrassed, which is sort of what we're saying. It's like, I think I'm a reasonably smart person in certain circumstances. Like, and like, one thing I will say about that is I don't get nervous in those certain situations on radio because I've done a million radio. Right. So that helps. But yeah, you should be embarrassed. Like, if I can do something intellectually and Doe can't do it, that brings Doe down. It doesn't bring me up. Do you know what I mean? It brings, yeah. So, I mean, Audra, I would say, she might claim differently 6 months later, but Audra had to see me after getting shut out.
Right.
She had to see me like 20 times in the next 35 days.
She would absolutely admit that was a terrible.
She was not in a good mood around me for quite a while.
No.
And I didn't really mock her. Like, I didn't bring it up, but like Bramer would bring it up for somebody. He's like, what's this initials game I heard you guys playing? And I was just like, shut up, Dick. Anyway, do you think that they will, well, we'll shut up here in a minute because it's probably very long.
We're almost at 2 hours.
Yeah. Do you think, I would guess they're definitely going to make the second chance tournament a semi-regular occurrence, right? Like,
I don't know.
because I feel like people got into it, but I guess it needs circumstances of super champions. Because having a second chance just with random people who lost to okay performers doesn't really.
Well, I think there's a couple different factors there. I mean, there were people on boards that were not thrilled about it like existing in the first place because some fans' point of view was, well, these are people that have already had their shots and lost, and they are maybe taking up showtime for people who have been trying to get on for years and years and have not. And I do feel sympathetic to that as somebody who's tried to get on for a couple.
There is a subjectivity to it, right? Like,
there is
Jeopardy can say with a decent level of confidence that they've chosen the 3 most competitive people who lost to Amy.
Yeah.
But there's no way to truly quantify that.
Right, and especially in a 1-game sample size because there's so much variance. I got a lot of variance in my game off the daily double that I got.
Right.
It all depends on how good your just reaction time is, how quickly you acclimate to the buzzer.
Jeopardy has more information than just sort of how you did, too. Like, they also have the information.
Yeah,
like,
they have the underlying buzz data, too, which they've actually started making public for the first time.
And also just like how good you looked as a qualifier. Like, I presume you're taking some tests or something like that to actually qualify for that. They must have a pretty good sense
that's also very different from actually being able to stand on the stage and time the buzz and go in, though. So I think it was a really cool experiment. I think I would have loved for either Jessica or Rowan to advance past the first round in the actual Tournament of Champions. I think that would have that would have helped the cause a little bit too in terms of making it a sustainable thing.
Did you like how the Tournament of Champions did best of 7 instead of 2-game combo, which I think they
I
used
like
to do?
I love the two. I love the 2-game. I love the 2-game. Like, I love the strategic element
they've always
that
done,
it introduced to that.
Which is, it resets each game you're combining 2, but you bring through your double Jeopardy or your final Jeopardy score. But I like that because maybe I'm saying this because it went 6 games, because it could have easily gone 3 games, and then you go, well, that was just kind of not anticlimactic because Andrew won twice, and even Sam won once. But like, it did have more of a sports vibe to it.
Yeah.
Like a best of 7. Like there was like momentum of the series. Like you go like, ooh, he's got 2, but she came back to tie it at 2 games apiece because they did 3 people, but first one to 3, so it's best of 7.
And the thing I'll say for this is that kind of like how the MLB playoffs, because of the off days and that sort of thing, are a different animal than the regular season. Like your MLB playoffs tell you who's best at playing playoff baseball. In the same way, the 2-game final changed the strategy in a way that it fundamentally changed the underlying games within the 2-game final.
There's less reason to be super aggressive.
It really changes the aggression and kind of the risk tolerance you got to have in game 2. So I think if you're trying to figure out who's the best at playing the base game of Jeopardy, that was the best. The best to 3. The first to 3 was the best way to do it. I love that. Yeah.
Okay, so now you've been on Jeopardy twice. I'm not gonna say you'll never be on again, but unlikely to be on.
Well,
again.
I texted the producer. Same time next year.
What if they just said
they just keep bringing on the losers until one of us is just like
we're
the
gonna bring
ultimate
these
loser?
suckers back until they win once? This guy's on like for his 40th year in a row.
Now we're doing the losers tournament.
Yeah, just the
I
0
got
and 10.
16 more to catch up to the Twins.
Yeah, but so what's like? Are there other game? No, not to say you aren't busy with your actual job and things, but like, are there other? You talked about the trivia stuff that you're in, which is probably not going to stop. I can't see Doe not doing that, no matter how busy he is. But like, what's the? There's like a game where.
What's the next mountain you climb?
Yeah, what other than Family Feud, which is notoriously difficult to get on because you need a whole family. Although the Twins beat writers on that one.
Honestly, that would be a riot of it.
That would be
we
funny.
should try to get.
How about like Twins,
I would be into that.
Twins beat writers versus like White Sox beat writers?
No. Twins beat writers against just like pick a group of twins.
Well, okay, fine. Yeah. Correa.
No, because I think because Mitch Hestad in the Twins PR, he really helped out with like chatting with Corey and that sort of thing and like getting us in touch. And I think he said like he brought like Dozier on to the Initials game once, and I think like Dozier got one and whatever.
I believe it. Yeah.
Mitch is the biggest fan of the Power Trip Morning Show.
Yeah, he's huge.
A true rube, I would say. But he doesn't want to be on himself because I said, knowing he's a huge fan, and he was very excited that I was going on and obviously helped Doe get on. And I was like, why don't you try to get on? Like, he's friendly with all the guys, and he's like, I don't know. Some people don't want to subject themselves to public mockery just for the attention, I guess. But I can't understand that at all, really. But yeah, so is it called The Chase?
Yeah, the chase is also a really good one. I've got
that's a lot of ex Jeopardy people.
Yeah, but like I don't know. It's weird, but like the competitive itch is still there. It was a lot of fun to compete in something like that.
Right.
I obviously like I'm used to like radio and TV or whatnot, so nothing about that is not I don't know. I am kind of emboldened by the experience in a way. I don't want to like get too far ahead of myself or whatever, but it was a lot of fun. I mean, it was fun to just kind of have my like friends be a part of that the second time, especially too, and just share an experience like that. And I'm like I'm an experience oriented person. I try to do as many things as I can in life. I love to experience things for the first or second time and just try new things.
Yeah,
and
that's where he's different than me.
That's just like and I mean, that's just like one of those things where I was like, this was just a cool life experience. And I'd love to just like kind of get the rush of having something new like that again. So I don't know. I may or may not have just binged an entire season of Survivor in 3 days.
Yeah.
I hadn't watched Survivor. Yeah. I'd never watched it.
So you're thinking that's the next step.
I don't think I'd be
reality
good at
show?
it. I don't think I'd be good at Survivor.
No, you would though.
I don't think so. I don't actually. That's what I've learned is that if you're physically threatening, people will vote you out, and I'm not physically threatening.
No, but you're not like a musclehead. But I don't know how you swim. But you could clearly the cardio aspect undoes a lot of people on Survivor. You know what I mean? I've watched like we've been binging Survivor for like 2 years now. I feel like I have a very good handle on like the strategy of the game. But the moment Jeff's like, all right, challenge number 1, you're going to jump here, swim here, run here. And I'm like, well, I'm out. I feel like Doe, you could do that. I feel like,
what about Bachelor?
Yeah, the Bachelor.
I don't know that my girlfriend would love that.
Listen, you got to sacrifice.
How
for the
about
team.
Sister Wives? My 90-Day Fiance.
No, but I do feel like on like Game Show Network or whatever, GSN, I guess it's called now, it does seem like there's more game shows than ever Because like, I felt like there was 3 when I was a kid. Because they were like syndicated and widely watched. Now they're not as widely watched. But I feel like there's 1,000 just game shows hosted by like some stand-up comedian you're sort of vaguely aware of, or some actor from like Best in Show or whatever. And it's like someone like Doe could just run the table on that, go on like 30 of them. I don't know what it pays, if something, but like I don't know. That would be.
I think I've heard about casting though. Is that like they don't. If they see like you've been on like Jeopardy or whatever, and it's just like another. I don't know if you want like to bring in somebody who like has experience that'll like give you a leg up on other people in that stage or like that because like you want good television.
That's true. But yeah, do you feel like I am also a poker watcher, and a lot of like Paul Pierce plays poker, Neymar plays poker, Draymond Green. Like there's a lot of athletes, current and former athletes, who play poker, and every time they interview them, what they say is, "Well, I had the most competitive job in the world for 15 years." And then I retired, and I was 34 years old, and I just sat on my ass all day, and I thought, well, my knees stink, and my back hurts, and I put on 50 pounds. Being competitive in a sport is
tricky
out now. What can I do? And I can go sit at the poker table and bet huge amounts of money in pressurized situations, and they like that. I think even like Michael Phelps talked about that. And I feel like Doe's at that point because you've played the biggest game show possible twice. And now you're jonesing for that same thing.
Well, I'm jonesing to actually win something.
Well, that's true. Yeah, maybe you need to go a slight step down. That's why the initials game was good for you.
I'm trying to figure out, like, on the opening night of Bachelorette, what do you do to stand out?
Why are you on the Bachelorette? What do you got against his girlfriend? She's a perfectly lovely woman.
I haven't met her, so she doesn't exist to me. So,
well, that's nice. I haven't met her, so she doesn't exist to me. Wait, that's. Are you one of those people? If they said to you, John, if you press this button, you get $50,000, but someone you'll never meet gets gravely injured.
Oh, no, I would not do it. No,
I'm not that guy. I've never met. I would do it. Buzzer.
How many times do I get to press it?
Yeah. It's great. Now I'm not only rich, but there's no one else in the world alive, so it's great. Maybe I'll buy Twitter. Fix it. All right. That's probably enough, right? You got any parting thoughts, though? Do you have any things you've been wanting to say to us?
What did we not cover?
As a coda to this.
Okay.
So within the people that were like into just like the fact that I was on the show or whatever, obviously Rocco Rocco pointed it out, I think, and was like excited about it. Only one player brought it up. And it was one day I think we were in Chicago. It was in the White Sox clubhouse. And I walk in, and I don't think he would mind me saying that it was
in the White Sox clubhouse.
Yeah, no. So I was in the visitors clubhouse.
Okay, visitors clubhouse
in Chicago.
Gotcha.
In Chicago.
Gotcha.
I don't think he would mind me saying it was Caleb Thielbar who like put a hand. He sees me across the clubhouse, and he's like, "Dope." And he like, and I'm just like, oh, this can't be good. Like usually when players are trying to avoid us in the club, when the player's slagging you down, it's not
I
really
want to talk to you about that last story you wrote.
Yeah, that's right.
And he like
right.
When you referred to my last pitch as a meatball, what did you mean?
And he just like asked me questions about it for like a solid 20 minutes of like, okay, what was the process like? How did you get on? What were the questions like? What did the stage look like? And I'm just like, dude, you should just take the thing.
Awesome.
You can do it right here, right now.
You also said that to a full press box one time. Hey, it's the day they're I don't know if there was like waiving the fees or it was test taking day. The Jeopardy website was like encouraging everyone. And he's like, you guys should take the test. And I was like, are you high? What are you talking about? Looking around who you're talking to.
But like Theobar's a driveline guy. Like he's
I'm
into
not
the
saying
he's a super thoughtful guy. Like I was actually very serious. I was like, you should think about this.
Caleb Thielbar's smarter.
Maybe you should think about it.
Average, Caleb
Mr. I set the record at Power Trip Initials.
Oh, that's
in one game.
But that's like being good at Candyland. Do you know what I mean?
Or Family Feud.
Yeah, that's exactly. I'll crush at Family Feud. If we can set that up, I'll take on anybody in Family Feud. Now, my family is not great. If I can choose my family. All right. Thank you, Doe, for being on again. I promise you can be back next time you're on Jeopardy. I don't promise, but there's a decent likelihood that we'll be willing to have you back. Even if that doesn't happen, but we'll evaluate that.
We'll have you sit in when we have Caleb Thielbar as a guest.
Or for the post-mortem for our Beat Power Trip Initials game.
Yeah, what if we both go on and just get destroyed by Marnie or something? Yeah. All right. Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Follow, I don't know.
At Do-Hyoung Park on Twitter.
Yes.
For as long as that exists.
Yeah, I don't know. Do you have anything else to plug? Go look at his videos on MLB.
Oh, I got to start doing those again this week.
Yeah.
Sign up for his email list.
Oh, yeah, the newsletter.
Yeah, that's it.
Those are my favorite Doe moments where
Yeah.
he gets a real good tidbit about some weird thing from a player and he goes, that's going to make a great newsletter. Like just evil almost. Like, that's going to be a great newsletter. Goodbye.
Gleeman